I now call the September 22nd, 2020 meeting of the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Board of Education to order. I will now entertain a motion to adopt the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
All right, with the motion from Ms. Byers-Bailey, a second from Ms. Sawyer. All those in favor of the motion, please raise your hands. Any opposed? All right, Madam Clerk, the agenda is adopted by a unanimous vote. Is there a motion that the board approve the consent agenda items?
Second.
All right, we've got a motion from Ms. De La Hara, a second from Ms. Byers-Bailey. Before we move to a vote, does any board member wish to pull any part of this motion for individual consideration? No, hearing none. All those in favor, please raise your hands. Any opposed? All right, Madam Clerk, that passes by a unanimous vote as well. Is there anything that you would like to speak to from the consent agenda before we move on?
No, ma'am.
All right. We have no action items tonight. So now we're going to move on to the reports. We have 3 reports tonight. The first is the Minority and Women and Small Business Enterprise Annual Report. Next, we're going to have an equity report on educational opportunities and high expectations. And then finally, we're going to have a progress report on the transition to in-person learning. So we'll start with, I'll hand it off to you, Mr. Superintendent, for the first report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening, board members. I have the honor of introducing Ms. Chiquita Lloyd, who is our Director of Diversity and Inclusion, to present to our board and members of our listening public the MWSBE report. I know that's a mouthful, but it stands for Minority Women and Small Business Enterprise Program. And Ms. Lloyd will share with you the significant progress that has been made since the implementation in 2005 of our policy designed to engage MWSBE. So with that, Ms. Lloyd, I will hand off to you.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Superintendent Winston, members of the board, for having me here tonight. I am pleased to bring to you our annual report. Just as a recap, our program has actually been around since 1993, but we made a lot of enhancements back in 2005 after we had that disparity study. And from that, we made significant changes for our staffing and how we track and our goals and what have you. So that's why we've made changes since then. So how we measure our success, we look at how we overall in our marketing and outreach, as well as certification and the utilization of our diverse suppliers. We look at our monitoring and reporting and the amount of training and technical assistance we're able to provide to our diverse suppliers. There are a variety of different general statutes that govern the work that we do, as well as board policy that looks at how we actually implement our program overall, and we're required to comply with general state statutes and provide quarterly reports back to the state of North Carolina. Based on some of those changes we made back in 2005, these are our aspirational goals that we benchmarked ourselves against in the various categories. As you can see here, in construction, our overall goal is 21%. For architect and engineering, we're at 16%, and for contractor services, 14%, and goods are 11%. So overall, we're looking at how are we performing. Based on 2019 and 20 eligible spend, we looked at a little over $354.7 million. Of that, $68.6 million was spent with our diverse firms. And as you can see, this is how it breaks down in those 4 categories that we measure, with $32.9 million going in construction and $779,000 in architecture engineering and $18.8 million in contractor services, with $16.1 million and $6 million. These is what the dollars look like. When we look at how our goals and how we compare, and the goals in construction is at 21, we're at 25.45. And when you look at all of the 4 categories, we exceeded our aspirational goals, with the exception of the 1 category in architecture and engineering. But we are maintaining at that level where we are now. Many of our projects we currently have are in design on the 2017 bond. But we're going to remain challenged in that particular category only because many of our firms that we had back in 2009-10 have now folded back into larger firms. So those that are actually being used now, we don't have as many to choose from. So as you look at our overall spend in comparison to the previous fiscal year, we did increase our spend. We went from $48 million up to $69 million of our eligible spend. When we break down further and look at our minority business owners as it relates to the goal, we were right at 7.28% in construction, and we exceeded our goal in architecture engineering, contractor services, and in the goods category. We're at the tail end now of finishing out our last of the 2013 bond projects. So after this point going forward, we'll be looking at a lot of our spend in the 2017 bond, and I'll share with you what we expect to see as we get into those projects coming out of the ground. Within our overall spend for our minority business owners, we also had an increase there. We went from $16 million up to $22 million over last year, during last year's fiscal year. For our women business owners, we also exceeded our aspirational goals in 3 out of the 4 categories, with those being in construction, contractor services, as well as in goods. And that spend also, we saw a huge increase over the previous fiscal year. We 18-19, we were at $20 million. Last year, we were at $35 million. For our SBEs, this is probably our one group that we did not see an increase in overall utilization. We did see a slight decrease in construction as well as in architecture engineering, but we came close to our goal in contractor services with also a slight decrease in their goods category. Overall spending for us over the previous fiscal year was down right about $1 million. So we stop and think about how we track and measure ourselves. We want to see what our overall community impact looks like. And so out of that overall spend of that $68.6 million, that represented right at 19.33% of our eligible spend went to our diverse suppliers. And as I said earlier, we did exceed our aspirational goals in 4 out of the 3 categories overall, as well as for our minority business owners, as well as for our women business owners. For our outreaches, even in spite of having a delay that had occurred due to COVID, we were able to get in 37 different vendor outreaches and conferences last year to promote CMS in partnership with our various trade associations, as well as some of our other community partners on engaging them on the various opportunities that we have over the coming year. We did participate in a small business symposium as well as various expos up until we had to pause back in March. But I am pleased to say, in spite of not having things in person, we still held outreaches virtually. So a lot of our pre-bid meetings, bid openings, community engagements, we all went virtual. So we still had the opportunity to still engage our community. For our workshops last year, we were able to have a little over 15 of them in person. During Charlotte Business, during our Charlotte Business midweek, we had various workshops that we had there, as well as each of some of the topics that we had covered. This is something that we do annually. We partner with the City of Charlotte, Mecklenburg County, our community college, our universities, as well as NCDOT and our other state partners, so that anyone who's looking to do business with us can go to one spot and have access to all of us to find out how to do business with each one of us. In addition to that, last school year, we also shared our best practices on how we do and implement our MWSB program with the City of Charlotte and within their Economic Development Committee, as well as City of High Point and Wake Tech Community College. So last year's Winter Trend Midweek, I'm pleased to say NJR Construction, who's one of our minority business owners, was received the Outstanding Achievement in Construction. All Points Waste was Outstanding Achievement in General Services. L&L Metals, Inc. was the Outstanding Achievement for Supplier. Harrisburg Security in Professional Services. Little Associates 2 was our Diversity Agency of the Year. And Calvin Stevens, who is Bernard Irvin Electrical Contractor, was our Diversity Advocate of the Year. And we also honored Ron Lieber for a lifetime achievement for all of his contributions he's made in the community to promoting not only workforce development, but the inclusion of our diverse suppliers. And I'm also pleased to say that one of our very own on our team was recognized by the North Carolina MWE Coordinators Network. Jason Deans received the Distinguished Coordinator for a Compliance Award, and this is something that was given out of all of the coordinators across the state of North Carolina. A little bit that's new for us this year in our report out. We wanted to see, when it came down to our 2017 bond, exactly what was going to be the overall economic impact of the bond. And I'm pleased to say, as of this summer, of that $1 billion that has been approved by our voters, $505 million of that has been committed to date, with $216.9 million of those dollars being committed to be spent with our diverse suppliers, representing a little over 47.58% utilization. So what you'll see over the next 2 years when I come and report out all of that spend is when there's a committed amount, and then we report out the actuals as it occurs. So you'll be able to see that spend going to our diverse suppliers and as we report out across all of our various spectrums. But not only wanted to see what the spend looked like, we wanted to know what does that mean as far as jobs and how do we measure the overall impact. So thanks to our partners at the Charlotte Business Alliance, along with LS3P, we were able to have a full economic impact study done as far as the impact of our diverse suppliers go. And we wanted to know not only what the direct spend with, through jobs and revenue impact on CMS suppliers, but what was the indirect through the supply chain, as well as how those dollars continue to turn within our community. So I'm pleased to say when you look at an overall detailed impact of our various channels, when it comes to our direct impact, there's a little over 601 jobs that were created directly, 93 indirectly, and another 161 within the community. We also want to look at to see what is the overall gross domestic product, as those contributions for our suppliers is right at $88 million. We want to look at what was the overall direct as it relates to annual income of our supplier diversity program for our diverse suppliers, right at $45 million. And then we want to say, okay, so what is the estimated tax impact of our program? And locally, you're looking at a little over $764,000. At the state level, right at $2.3 million. At the federal level, a little over $10 billion is the overall impact. This is just with our diverse suppliers. So why does that translate down into as far as actual jobs? And we looked at those channels. With our minority-owned business, that represents a little over 355 jobs. And then you look at the 25 million in income, and another of 56.3 million is the gross domestic product. For our women-owned firms, that's a little over 478 jobs with 34 million in income and 74.9 million in gross domestic product. For our small business owners, we're at 21 jobs, 1.6 million in income and 3.4 million on the gross domestic product. For our overall impact of right at $134.6 million of contribution to our Mecklenburg County economy, representing a little over 855 jobs that are supported by our diverse suppliers, with 61.4 million of income earned by their employees. So what's next for us? We have looked at, I think last year when I came before you, we talked about our workforce development program. And for us, we look at it two ways as far as the future workforce for our students, opportunities for the unemployed, underemployed, displaced, and or underserved populations. And then we look at our overall goals of how can we strengthen that workforce pipeline. And then we measure ourselves against what's available in the market and how we partner with our various pre-apprenticeship programs, as well as the various internships and shadowing opportunities that are available in our community. I'm pleased to say, in spite of COVID, we were in our office able to participate in the Mayor's Youth Employment Program this summer. We had 2 students that actually worked in our office virtually, of course. We were able to provide them various learning opportunities, as well as to have in-depth interviews within their career choice fields for consideration, where they were able to ask their direct questions, understand what was their background of how they applied, what kind of courses they took in college, what was their whole career path. And then we had them rate us and evaluate our program to see what they can recommend to us. Our partners that we have in our workforce development program also had internships through the program as well. And they also, we had 2 of our firms make available their apprenticeship opportunities and programs through electrical and ceramic tile. And then we had various site tours that was done for our partners over at Goodwill students to actually go out to our site at Olympic High School Relief to tour the site, ask their questions, and some of these folks would be eligible for jobs as we do the various packages for our subcontractors once they graduate from the program to be interviewed and then particularly go on for work from there. We had 7 of our CMS students receive a little over $3,000 in scholarships this summer, to those who participated through the ACE program. And then, like I said, we sponsored, and also we had 2 of our students sponsored to attend the UNC Charlotte Summer Design Academy. So as devastating as COVID has been, I'm pleased to say our folks got real creative to figure out a way to still provide opportunities for our students as well as for our overall community. Here are our industry partners who we cannot thank enough. They have embraced all of the work as it relates to our MWSB program, as well as helping us to develop our workforce development program, and they all step up to the plate and have provided input and or access to jobs that we have available on our CMS projects. And these are our community resource partners that we have. Each one of them has played a role in helping us to shape what we do and how we do it, as well as sharing up their best practices on how we can further improve going forward. So for us, our next steps, we will continue with our outreach virtually, of course. Several of our projects have gone through the pre-qualification and the bidding portion. Charlotte Met Week will occur next month on October 12th through the 15th. We will participate, and during the Med Week, we will actually have a job career fair on that Monday. We also will have a panel as it relates to the various, we call it our Finance Cafe, where vendors can find out about various opportunities for funding through the regular banks as well as through the SBA or self-help. And also found out today that the governor's office will have a grant program that will become available starting in October, and they will be available as well during our virtual conference to share information on how our vendors can apply for that. And then we want to have a virtual Business Connection Expo where folks actually can zoom in and go from room to room to meet with various buyers on how to do business with them as well. And we do plan on also continuing to have our summer internships next spring through the summer. Hopefully we'll be in person again. If not, our 2 interns we had this summer told us how we could have made the experience even better for them outside of the fact we were not in person. So we've taken all that to heart and made the adjustments so that next summer we'll hopefully have more than the 2 students that we have for this year. And then our Workforce Development Advisory Group, we meet quarterly, and they share what is occurring out on the job, how many opportunities they see coming down the pike. Our partners let us know who's actually hiring, so we set up our career fairs to the support of, and then we've also will get commitments early as to who can work with our CTE program for our internships for next summer. And with that, I'll pause and ask for questions.
Thank you. Questions? Ms. Byers-Bailey.
Thank you. Thank you for this report. I always look forward to it every year, and my question is pretty much always the same. How do we compare our, you know what the question is, how do we compare with the city and the county and their hiring rates for MWSBE?
Ditto from all the other board members. We all want to know.
I can say this year, in comparison to the city of Charlotte, they are ahead of us in their spend. Thank you, which I'm grateful for because of the airport. A lot of jobs have been created there, and we share our best practice back and forth with that to help keep that chain going, because I'm really concerned with the market as where we are now in the downturn. So we make a habit of promoting each other's projects so that our contractors are aware, and trying to keep them employed as much as we can so we don't lose any of them. That's my biggest fear is 09, 10, we lost a lot. And I am really concerned coming out of this, how we're going to be left standing. So county-wise, I cannot give you the numbers because they don't report out the way we do. But the city, we do. We have a nice, healthy competition for. But I anticipate, given what we have coming down the pike now that we've made so many awards on our bond side of the house, we should be well over right at $100 million next year. So I'm very excited for that.
Thank you.
So their spend is higher, but what about percentages? How does
Spend is higher. We're ahead of them in some of our other categories when you break it down in the lower levels. So the overall spend, they're higher. And then when you get into the little categories, it's kind of like, we have this one, they have that one, and we kind of go back and forth.
Who else? Lenora, Ms. Shipp?
Yes, I just want to say, first of all, thank you for this work. This is really outstanding and it's great. And I think what's so very important is the connection we make with our students, so that this is real opportunities for internships and work and looking at their future. And I love it that you work with them on how this work links to careers and how they go forward with the kinds of work they're going to be looking at for jobs they want in the future. So I think this is wonderful, and really giving them these opportunities throughout the district, and how it connects with CTE, I think is great. So I want to thank you for that. And I think this is what we look at when we talk about our children, our students, especially in high school, and where do they go after high school, and how do they begin to look at their careers. I think this is also just a wonderful opportunity to do that. And thank you for what you're doing in that connection.
Thank you. I need to also say, when it comes to our students, all of our partners and our diverse suppliers, whether they be large or small, have all agreed to participate in what we have our career days, so that they can share with the students various options that are there. Most folks think construction is just out in the field, the hammer and the nail. But it's also the back office, where you have your accounting, you have your marketing, you have your communications, project management. There's various layers of careers that are there, and they share those opportunities with them. But even more importantly, our students are able to see vendors that look like them. So it's a diverse group of folks that come in who are business owners, as well as the employees who can talk about their career paths and how they can map out once they leave CMS. So I'm very pleased with that. And in some, like I said, we even have a couple that are in college now who are still interning with our firms from 2 years ago, and hopefully will be hired once they graduate.
This is wonderful, because, and I do have to just push out there for our women, for our young ladies, and for them to see the possibilities of jobs they probably never even thought about, as well as of course, our young men. So thank you so much for this. It's really good.
And colleagues, you'll have to forgive me, I'm adjusting back to real life. I'm used to looking for hands on Zoom, on the Zoom boxes, but I've got to get my peripheral vision back. So Ms. Marshall.
Just briefly, too, I want to tell the community, make sure you drive by Montclair Elementary and Collinswood Elementary and Ray Farms K-8, because those are newly delivered schools this year. And as I would drive by them during construction, to see all kinds of folks out there working. So I think, again, the fact that this is a bond that we voted on, that stays in the county, that provides jobs, and then we're collecting taxes on the earnings and the goods that are purchased. So it really is an incredible circle and so beneficial. So thank you, everybody that voted for bonds. Go out and look at these beautiful schools, and hopefully one day you get to go in them and really see how incredible they are. So just more of a comment. So thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Sawyer.
Thank you. I'm so excited about the student participation in these projects. About how many students have you cycled through, and what's our capacity? How many students would we like to get involved?
I would say for us right now, we just started this past summer. We had our students, we only had 10 because we had a lot of our employees because they could not fulfill the need during the summer. But hopefully going back, I think the mayor's goal was to have a little over 1,000 students this past summer. We ended up like around 600. So the goal is there. It's just a matter of we need to have the virus get behind us so we can provide. But I think next year we'll even have, now that we've adjusted to this virtual mindset, that maybe our employers who were not able this past summer, virtually or in person or not, will still be able to support our students.
Thank you. I mean, it's so exciting to have that career ladder and in-person experience for students. Thank you.
Anyone else? Could you go back to the economic impact slide?
Sure. Which one?
That's a good one. Okay, so first with that one, I just want to make it clear, that's the economic impact of our MWSBE participation, not overall.
No,
So
that's-
that is just so far in the
Yep.
2017 bond we have committed or spent?
We've committed.
We've committed 216, no,
Yeah,
500,
no,
yeah,
we- we've com-
216,
$216.9 to our
$217
diverse suppliers out of that $505.1 million. Next year, when we come back, I'll be able to give you the full of not just our diverse suppliers, but the majority firms as well, to see what that dollar amount looks like as the impact of all of the contractors on the jobs.
And then can you go, there's another slide, not that one, not that one, this one. This one blows me away. And this one too, I just want to be clear for our board and for the full public. This is not, first of all, I'm so glad that we have an economic impact study. That's something that I've been asking for years now. But just to be clear, this is not the full economic impact. This is the economic impact specifically for our minority-owned businesses, women-owned businesses, and small businesses.
Correct.
And so to look at, we've created 355 jobs, $25 million worth of income for minority businesses with the 2017 bond. I just think that's phenomenal. That's a number that we really need to be loud about, because so often there's this sense of schools being something you spend money on, not something that generates revenue. And schools are a fountain, not a drain.
Correct.
And I'm just so, I mean, obviously, you need strong schools for a strong economy, obviously, long-term, but short-term too, we're job generators and tax revenue generators.
That is correct.
I'm just so grateful that we've been able to do this report, get these numbers, and I'm thankful to the partners who made that possible.
Yes, greatly appreciate all the hard work the Charlotte Business Alliance put into putting these numbers together for us. We gave them all of our spending information, and then for LSVP architects for making the connection to help us to deliver this for us tonight. And like I said, they are working on the other half of it as well. And just be mindful, this is only halfway through the bond. We have other projects that are yet to bid. We have 2 more that are in design that'll be doing bidding this winter, and then the rest will be in the spring. And so as we deliver that full $1 billion, I don't see any reason why we wouldn't be at $500,000 of that going to our diverse suppliers. So the potential is definitely there. Folks are motivated. My biggest issue, like I said, I'm concerned is to making sure we have enough diverse vendors and vendors, period, still standing as the economy tries to rebound.
And this is just so far.
This is so far,
This is not the full.
as of right now.
And that's the other important message, is the last time we had the Great Recession, we seized a lot of our bond projects.
Yeah.
And then a lot of businesses that had been thriving kind of dried up and blew away. And we've since, as a community, had to rebuild that whole ecosystem of minority and women and minority-owned, women-owned small businesses. So very hopeful that even if we are looking at an economic downturn, that we can keep these schools getting built, keep these jobs going, keep these businesses up and running.
We were fortunate back in 09-10, because for the most part, the public sector was the only game in town, because a lot of the private jobs went silent. So like I said, we were able to sustain quite a few, and this year will help us sustain quite a few. But I am still concerned of our smaller guys. Those who were not successful in winning the bid, what happens to them? Because I'm sure the concern is still there.
Thank you for your work. Thank you for seeing this through. So back to you, Mr. Superintendent.
Thank you, Madam Chair and board members. This evening, we will be making the first of 6 equity reports this school year in accordance with Board Policy ADA. This first report, Educational Opportunities and High Expectations, will be delivered by none other than Dr. Frank Barnes, our Chief Equity Officer. Following Dr. Barnes' report, he will be joined by members of our academics team who will be here to help answer any questions that board members may have. And I would be remiss if I did not give Dr. Barnes a shout out as he celebrates his birthday today. So thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Mr. Winston. It's a privilege to be here. At first, I was rather reticent to spend such a day with y'all, but upon reflection, what better gift can one have than to live with purpose and to labor with those who you regard and respect for those who have labored for you. So it's a privilege. So as Mr. Winston said, this is the first of what will be 6 presentations, which will be brought to you on an annual basis in alignment with your policy ADA, which this board revised in 2019. The particular report is Educational Opportunities and High Expectations. I won't read you this segment of the policy, but to summarize, there's 3 areas that you ask for us to come to you and report on. And one is access to particular opportunities. The second is participation in those particular opportunities. And then the summative performance of our students around those particular opportunities where it is relevant. So we're going to talk to you in about 6 different areas about access, participation, and performance. And in some instances, those things may not be a one-to-one-to-one alignment, but those will be the 3 segments. Within your policy, our policy ADA, we'll talk about grade level curriculum and access to grade level curriculum, access to advanced courses, access to world languages, to the performing, access to the performing and visual arts. We'll talk about media centers as well, and we'll talk about our career and technical education, or CTE, options. And likewise, participation in those, as well as performance on metrics related to those. Allow me to start with on-grade level curriculum. Right now, thank you to this board for approving a budget that allowed us to make an initial purchase in a 3-year phase and plan to provide curriculum in English language arts and mathematics. What you already have allowed us to do and to purchase, and I do want to say before I go much farther, is that what we're talking about is a year in review. That was the one thing I forgot to mention, please forgive me. This is a year in review looking back at the 2019-20 school year. Most metrics that I'll provide will be with that unless there are no metrics for 2019-20, which I'll mention when we get to that. And then I would look at 18-19. Every year we come to you, and in the subsequent reports, we'll do a year in review looking back at what access or participation or performance from the prior year. Forgive me for skipping that in my nervousness. But what you allowed us to do in 2019-20 was to make an initial purchase with an initial adoption of curriculum in both English language arts and mathematics for the targeted grades you see here. Oh, excuse me. As you see in this 3-year phased-in plan, by the beginning of the 2021-22 school year, we will have an adopted standards-aligned, grade-appropriate curriculum in grades K through 8 in English language arts and mathematics, as well in Mathematics 1 in middle school and high school. I'm sorry, this is a sensitive pointer. As we think about our outcomes, as you know, because of the COVID-19 pandemic, we weren't last year able to administer end-of-grade or end-of-course assessments, so we don't have any performance data for the last school year. We do have performance metrics for the 2018-19 school year, which on these particular slides you'll see says 2019. These are data that you've already seen, but for our viewing audience, just to show you, you can see here a horizontal line showing our district average, and then you see for the targeted subgroups, going from left to right, Asian, Black, Hispanic, White. In this case, the federal designation is students with disabilities, but we would like to call them exceptional children, or EC students, English learners is what the L acronym is for. Our talented and gifted students, our AIG students, and economically disadvantaged students is what the EDS stands for. And that's from left to right on about the next 6 different graphs we'll show. What you see here is that we do have substantial gaps. This is where we're starting as a proverbial baseline for the policy that you pass. This is where we're beginning. It can't be where we stay. So the summative efforts that we'll be bringing to you, both for this year and in future years, will be to attack and eliminate these gaps. But this is humbly where we begin. On this slide here, you see both English language arts for grades 3 through 8 and high school English 2, and these are all career and college ready rates and the gaps for each of the particular groups. This is for mathematics. In 1819, the state administered a new mathematics exam. So it would not be apples and orange comparisons to be able to look at multiple years, but this is what it looked like in math grades 3 through 8. Similarly, the state administered a new assessment in Math 1 and introduced a new EOC in Math 3, which they launched on. They also changed some of the business rules on how this is counted. So although our numbers are relatively low, we're actually outperforming the state average, and we're also outperforming our peer districts in the state of North Carolina who are urban school districts. However, you can see here, there are still substantial gaps between the different subgroups, particularly our white students and our Black and Hispanic students in these areas. In science, although our performance is still higher, the gaps are still substantial. So again, I say to you, this is where we start as you've now revised Policy 88, and here is where our work lies ahead of us. So we'll continue to adopt this curriculum annually to make sure that the curriculum we adopt, which is a written curriculum, becomes the taught and experienced curriculum or enacted curriculum for our students. We'll continue to provide supports to our teachers so that they can deliver that curriculum effectively and with fidelity. And we'll also begin the full-scale implementation of a multi-tiered system of supports, also known by its acronym MTSS, to be able to make sure that we're able to early identify students who need extra help, or in some instances, extra challenge, direct them to that help, and see if the help that we're offering is helpful, to see if we need to increase the intensity, decrease the intensity, or do something different. So advanced coursework. We offer what someone could coin advanced courses in elementary school, the middle grades, whether it be a middle school or a K-8, and in the high school grades 9 through 12. Across each of those opportunities, there's different opportunities for students to be able to push in and to take advantage of those things. In the high school grades, students who take on that extra challenge, those advanced courses, get extra grade point average points, which are calculated. What you see here is a program which is called Learning Immersion Talent Development. I have to always say that, not just use the acronym LITD, but the Learning Immersion Talent Development Program is based at 6 schools, and students are able, through a screening process at 2nd grade, gain admission to this particular program, and this is at the 6 magnet schools that offer this program. What you see here are 2 things side by side. In the gray or blue tone side on what is my left, I think should be on your left as well, that is the percentage of students in that particular subgroup who make up all students in grades 3 through 5 in that targeted grade. To say it differently, in 3rd through 5th grade, approximately 7.6% of our students in 2019-20 were Asian. In 3rd through 5th grade, approximately 35.2% of our students in 3rd through 5th grade were Black, and so on and so forth as you move from left to right. The green tone bar there is the percent of students in the Learning Immersion Talent Development Program who were that particular subgroup. Stated otherwise, approximately 17% of the students in the 6 schools in grades 3 through 5 who were in the Learning Immersion Talent Development Program were Asian. Approximately 39% of the students in the Learning Immersion Talent Development, or LITD program, in those targeted grades were Black, and so on and so forth from left to right. What you're looking at here, or what I'd like to encourage you to look at here, is a level of proportionality or disproportionality. What you see here, for example, if you look at, for Black students, you have almost a level of proportionality where the proportion of students in the targeted grades are about the proportion of the students who are in the particular program, taking advantage of that. What you have here is a little bit of disproportionality here for Asian students, where there is a greater proportion of Asian students in the Learning Immersion Talent Development Program than there are in the targeted groups. And say, for example, Hispanic students, you have a disproportionality where there's a greater percentage of those students in the student body than there are in that program, and so on and so forth from left to right. So here's what I'd like you to be able to take away from this. Where are we proportionate and where are we disproportionate? As we move to the secondary grades, we now have an array of different opportunities, from dual enrollment at our colleges and local colleges and universities, to international baccalaureate programs, advanced placement classes, Cambridge programs, and what I would think is an outstanding career and technical education opportunity in Project Lead the Way. Each of these offer opportunities for students to take on what we would call advanced courses or extra challenge. And each of these offer different grade point average, GPA types of opportunities for increased credit. What you see here is the participation rates in each of these types of programs by subgroup. So what you see here is in these advanced courses, you have a level in the middle grades and in the high school grades, what I would say, of differences in the percent of the student body who takes advantage of those things. You might say that these participation gaps in many ways mirror some of the achievement gaps we saw in the earlier EOGs and EOCs. Yes. As we look at the performance, there are not as many measures like the EOGs or EOCs to determine how students, say, objectively are performing. So we'll lean on grades in many instances in this presentation, but for advanced placement, we have advanced placement exams. Students score a 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5, 1 through 5, with 5 being the highest, 1 being the lowest. And if you say a 3, 4, 5 is, we use this nomenclature, they pass the exam, but really they could get college credit for a 3, 4, 5 on that advanced placement exam. For international baccalaureate or IB exams, the scale is 1 to 7, 1 being the lowest, 7 being the highest. And if you get a 4 through 7, then you would also be able to get more credit for that in college. We do have one school which is administering the Cambridge exams. Although we have student level data, we couldn't break it up into smaller subgroups without risking violating the privacy of those students. So we didn't report that here. Hopefully, as we have more schools not only having the Cambridge program, but having their students take the Cambridge exams, we can be able to break those data out for you. What you see here are the advanced placement AP exams, those students who are scoring a 3, 4, or 5. What you see here is for every subgroup going from left to right, the percent of exams taken by students in that subgroup that got a 3, 4, or 5. Said otherwise, for Asian students, of the Asian students who took an exam, 72.6 of the exams taken got a 3, 4, or 5. So it's looking at not at the number of students, but the actual exams that students took, understanding that some students could have taken, did take more than one exam. Keep that in mind. But here you see there's disparities between the racial subgroups where Asian and white students are our highest performing, and you see our Black and Hispanic students are lowest performing, and you see the differences for our EC students, L students, and AIG students. Though I do want to show significantly that I think it's important that we recognize, particularly for our EC students and our L students, that because you have an exceptionality, because your first language is in English, you can still take advantage of these courses and have success. So I would like for us to adopt as a community, recognizing there's some real obstacles for students to have access and succeed in advanced courses, some exceptionalities, and language does not need to be one of them. And we recognize that. For international baccalaureate, we have not yet received student level data from the global body that administers that exam, but we do have aggregate scores of students who scored, the percent of students who scored a 4 through 7 at the magnet schools that have an international baccalaureate or IB program. So what you can see here is the percent differences here. Although we don't know exactly what the subgroups are for this yet, as you look at the demographics of some of these schools, you can get some insight to how those schools are doing and how students in those programs who are matriculating all the way to examination taking are doing in those programs. So with our advanced coursework, this is something we're going to continue to work on. Some things that we've already done to increase access is we have what you have supported us and encouraged us to do is we have a minimum of 10 AP core courses that are at every comprehensive high school that we offer, that students can register and may take. We also developed, and this is the first year we've actually rolled this out, even during these COVID-19 conditions, where we have a 5th block offered where students most of the time will have 4 blocks. A student, if they wanted to take an extra AP course, could have a 5th block where they could take that either at their school or at another neighboring school, meaning in the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Schools portfolio. We have an initiative that began with a partner, external partner, which we're now transitioning to solely owned and run by Charlotte-Mecklenburg Schools, which we've coined Access 2024 to align with our strategic plan. Within Access 2024, what we've done is tried to broaden the definition of AP potential, although we've used something like the PSAT to be able to identify students ready for extra challenge. We're now broadening that to also include both interests and disposition. Students who can, when they face a cognitive challenge, can persist in light of that challenge. We've used student recruitment efforts to push in students and to draw in students as opposed to set up gateways to keep them out. That's part of that initiative. Using particularly what we would call trusted adults, and those trusted adults are adults who the students themselves, through surveying, identified someone in the school they respected and regarded and would listen to. So they're not people we said were trusted, it's who that individual student said they trust, using those trusted adults to recruit them to take on extra challenge. Because if you haven't taken on extra challenge before, it can be intimidating. And some students are saying, well, what if I don't do well? What if I fail? We encourage them to persist for the experience, and let's not worry about some of those things. And we've also integrated tools into the use of our tools and structures to talk about both implicit bias and mental models about who is a successful AP student and where might that background come with. And we've talked about that with students and with adults. To give students who are taking on that extra challenge, we've continued to invest, thank you for your budget support, with AVID and tutoring sessions, recognizing that it's not just the disposition, but some students need real additional help when they persist and want to take on that. And we're continuing to work with our AP teachers to expand their capacity, to expand their portfolio, so as you're bringing in more students, that we can differentiate our teaching without lowering a rigorous AP standard. We want to make sure it's a rigorous experience, but creating access and opportunities for that experience. Within the middle grades, we've also, within our strategic plan, we have a target for a percent of students who would experience Math 1, what we all used to call algebra, although it's integrated. Mr. Kingsley will correct me as I'm getting it wrong there. But Math 1 by the 8th grade. Part of what we've done is we've tried to set a clear criteria across all of our middle grades, middle and K schools, where students have to meet 3 of 5 as a ceiling. Not 4 of 5, not 5 of 5, but 3 of 5 of these criteria. A school, if they wanted to lower it to 2 of 5 or 1 of 5, they may, but they can't go higher than 3 of 5 of these agreed upon criteria. What we're in is our second year of monitoring these metrics and identifying students whether they asked for Math 1 or did not ask for Math 1, pushing them into those classrooms, but recognizing that we still have an open access to these courses. So any student can ask for them. However, each of us know that there's children in our school district who do not have a parent advocate for them who either has the cultural capacity to be able to push in or an awareness of our system and how it works. What we've tried to set up is the beginning of a process where our system will advocate for the student. If you're ready for extra challenge, you're going to have to opt out, not have to beg or break a door down to get in. So that is the low-hanging fruit. As we implement both our Envision 2020, our K-5 math curriculum, and our Open Up Math curriculum, that's in the middle grades, we want to get more and more students ready for Math 1 in the 8th grade, but we want to be an advocate for that system. But we have a large proportion of students who don't meet any of those criteria, and they still get to take the course. We're not trying to keep kids out. We're trying to push them in and open the door to access. Career and technical education, also known by the acronym CTE. I've had an opportunity in getting ready for this presentation to learn even more about our career and technical education programs. Not only do we have an array of courses that students may take in both the middle grades and the high school grades, What you've allowed us to invest in and we need to build on is pathways to a career that lead to upward mobility. Of the 19 pathways across our district at various high schools across the learning communities. Not all 19 pathways are in each learning community, but we have 19 across the district. There's 3 things I want to ask that you would pay attention to as you think about these pathways. One is the percentage and number of students who declare their interest in a pathway, say, I want that, I want to pursue that career. The second is staying on track to completing that pathway, so I'm interested, I'm on track to get it. And then third, those folks who are then completing the pathway and they're concentrators or they're getting certification. Those are things, so students, whether they are going into their career immediately after high school or they're pursuing that career after 2 years of further education or 4 years of further education. My colleagues in career and technical education, CT, have been adamant that we suggest to you and to our community that our old mental models of what CTE was, and that's for those kids, is a misnomer and is not accurate. That these are for students who can be college bound or for students who say direct entrance into college isn't for me, but this can be for any of our students, no matter what their prior academic experience had been. This is a viable, high-quality academic opportunity. So that's why we wanted to bring it to you in accordance with Policy ADA. Once again, you've already received literature on our CTE programs, and it's also on our website for our listening audience, so you can see what pathways, or which pathways, are in which learning communities and which specific high schools. As you think about this trajectory going from left to right, you want students to be able to get some exposure to the pathways in their early high school experience, be able to make a declaration by 10th grade, stay on track through 11th grade, and then conclude and successfully exit high school with the completion of that pathway onto either their immediate career or post-secondary aspirations. What you see here are 2 different tables. I'll deal with the top table and then the bottom table, and I'll talk about it from left to right. At the top table, you see the students who have taken at least one CTE course by the conclusion of 12th grade. These are students who have, say, sampled in the CTE experience. They haven't made any declaration of what they want to do. Excuse me, I said declaration of what they want to do, but they've attempted and tried a CTE course just to see if they would like it. On the bottom, what you have is the number of students who have declared a pathway. So if I were to look at students with disabilities or EC students in that middle column right about there, you would say about approximately 748 EC students by the conclusion of 12th grade, once again, this is looking back last school year, had tried a CTE course. Approximately 235 students had said, I would like to pursue a pathway. These numbers aren't bad or wrong, but it lets us know where we're starting from as we roll out this policy ADA and what the differences are by subgroup, whether that be by primary language, exceptionality status, or racial subgroup. So what you see here is the overall district average, approximately 15% of our overall student body have said, okay, I want to be involved in this declaration. But about 15% are actually on track. And this number isn't bad or wrong. It's just saying about 15% of the students said, hey, I'm not only interested, I'm on track. So this isn't a bad or wrong number. It's just, it is what it is at this moment. But what is interesting is you see the level of parity amongst the groups. A bit lower for EC students or L students, but regardless of race, you see there's some similarity in that, and that's interesting. I'm not sure fully what to read into that, but it's very interesting. We see disparities in other areas. Here we don't. As we think about performance, we have a couple of indicators that we'll bring to you, and we'll refine these over time as we make subsequent reports to this body. 2 that we'll present to you this evening are the number and percent of students who received a certification, as well as an exam called the ACT Work Keys, which is part of our state accountability system. Students on the ACT Work Keys can get either a platinum, gold, silver, or bronze. If you do a silver or better, that is what the state's accountability system says is our expectation for performance or high performance. So you'll see the percent of scores that were silver or higher. Oops. There we go, okay. So what you first see here is the percent of students who went on to a certification. This is students who were eligible to get the certification who either, and so I want to distinguish between course performance and the exam performance. So you could, just like an advanced placement course, you can pass that course with an A, B, C, or D, but then you have the AP exam that you have to take or can take. Not all students choose to or have to take that exam. And so you're looking at the denominator in this equation is the students who are in the courses that would lead to the certification. The numerator is the percent or number of students, or the number of students who are succeeding on that certification examination or doing the work that would then lead to the certification being awarded by the body that's offering it. Overall, we had approximately 4,300 students who were able to earn certificates or certifications last year. My apologies. Here we go. For the ACT work keys, you see for those concentrators, and the state is specific that the ACT work keys exam is administered to concentrators who are seniors, not concentrators who are sophomores or juniors, but they have to be a senior and they have to be a concentrator. That's who you determine who is given the exam, and these are the percentages. Here we're seeing some of the disparities that we saw on other assessments on how they were performing. There's a number of things that our team is doing, the academics division is doing to be able to raise this performance and to increase access to these pathways and persistence to successful completion of the pathways. In particular is working with our high schools to build master schedules that can accommodate the diversity of student interests that we have before us. What our high schools are challenged with is to be able to take the finite number of teacher positions that they have and build classrooms that allow everything from world languages, visual arts, advanced placement, in some instances have IB programs, but they need to be able to build up pathways, not just a single course, but multiple courses, 3 to 4 to 5 courses in a particular pathway for students to succeed. Working on that, working to continue to build partners with industry so that the experiences students have are meaningful and will prepare them for a career. Certainly, at the conclusion of this presentation, we'd welcome your questions and dialogue about this deeper with some of our colleagues from the CTE community. World languages. We have a robust language program that we offer here for students in elementary, middle, and high school. We have 76 schools which are able to offer language programs. 7 of our high schools have partnered with one of our higher education partners to offer additional world language opportunities. We have 2 particular schools, language schools, that we partner with here, and we had 15 students who are part of that partnership be able to earn credits both in CMS and at that school to be able to enrich their education to build fluency in a world language. When you look at our world language opportunities, what you see here across the bands in this chart is the types of languages that are in the elementary grades, the middle grades, and high school grades. And what you see at the very far right in this chart are the percent of CMS students who are availing themselves of this opportunity or participating in this opportunity. What you see here is both because of your work on policy around what our graduation requirements are, as well as what you see as emerging opportunities as we have more opportunities to provide things, is that a minority of our students are able to avail themselves of world languages in the elementary grades. That increases exponentially in the middle grades, and then you have just about immediately half of our students in high school grades being able to take advantage of this. So participation varies. When you look at it by racial subgroup and by other subgroup, you can see here that there's a level of parity here like you saw in the CTE programs, with the exception of our Asian students and in some degree our L students. So although in the elementary grades, which is what you see before you, although the number isn't as high as perhaps it will be in 3 or 4 years, you can see the level of parity in offerings across the subgroups. When you get to the middle grades, you see a comparable level of parity, with the exception of our EC students, our L students, and our AIG students. But otherwise, in the middle grades, you see a greater level of parity, and where students are exercising more choice and have other influences on the schedules that they make. You can see some gaps between the subgroups, but for the most part, there is a high level of parity and opportunity taking when you look at the gaps that existed in performance. They're smaller in magnitude once you get to the high school grades, nearly non-existence between the racial subgroups and the middle grades. We don't have an assessment that we give across all of our language programs, so we have to use the percent of students as passed as a performance metric to be able to accommodate the demands of the policy that has been created. So here you see that in the middle grades, the high school grades, those students who take advantage of these opportunities are performing well, and you see a higher level of parity than you do on the test score performance. You do see in the high school a bit of a difference, but that's only a few percentage points on average when you look at passing those courses. When you look at advanced course participation, you do see a bit of a gap. So here you're seeing greater gaps between the subgroups when it comes to taking advanced courses in the languages. This is a growth opportunity that we have as a district. This is our baseline of where we're starting, looking back in 1920 with the rollout of our policy. This allows us to know where we can start and where we can build on the existing investments and the great work that's already happening, but offering it to more students. And you look at here, when you, once again, through passing, those students who do avail themselves of this opportunity, you can see that the performance gaps here are marginal when compared to test score gaps. So those students who are persisting and saying, I want to take advantage of it, are persisting and succeeding in those classes based on the grades that they receive. There are numerous things that we're doing to build on our world languages, to build on our world-class successful language immersion programs in K-5 or K-8, being able to once again work with our principals to be able to make sure that we're managing the diversity of interests and the diversity of opportunities to build a well-rounded master schedule that students can then build individual schedules around, and partnering with different departments to make sure that as we're not working in silos, but under the leadership that's in this district, to be able to continue to build synergies, to be able to allow students to pursue rigor and pursue language at the same time, and not see them at odds with each other, but see them as integrated opportunities. Visual and performing arts. What we know is that visual and performing arts, although different than the core content, helps enrich minds to be able to succeed in other areas. Some of you who might be like me might have found athletics or the arts as the reason to be at school. So being able to offer things like the arts, whether it be visual arts or performing arts, are things that can engage our students, can enrich our students, and captivate our students and help them excel. What you see here is across this band of elementary, middle grades, and high school grades, the percent of students who are enrolled in these types of visual arts programs. What you see here is that we're able to introduce our students at great rates in the early grades to visual and performing arts. That then begins to decline in the middle grades, and because of competing demands and maybe perhaps competing interests, fewer and fewer students, as they matriculate through our system, are choosing to take the visual performing arts. And so that's something we need to continue to work on. When you look across the subgroups, and this is for the elementary grades, you can see that across the racial subgroups, there really isn't any gap in access in these ways based on who's taking courses with visual or performing arts. As we go to the middle and high school grades, you can see there's parity through the subgroups. There's parity in the subgroups in the middle grades, and I would say even so with the small decline between white and Hispanic students and our ELF students in high school, but there's a greater level of parity of access even as we matriculate to the secondary grades. When you look at performance, we don't have any standardized assessment we give, so we are reliant on grades. And you can see students are performing well, both in middle school and high school, in those courses. So we want to make sure that we're increasing access and opportunity for students to express themselves and be enriched by by access to the arts, particularly those students who might be EC and who are ELF students. I apologize. We have a number of partnerships, the Charlotte Arts Partners, which includes most, if not all, of the museums that we have here in the district, are partnering with our district to be able to offer more programs, enriching programs. I think of particular interest is the partnership with Charmeck Academy with the Mint Museum and Marie G. Davis with the Harvey Gantt Museum, thinking about how do we offer both culturally relevant but also accessible arts experiences to students of different backgrounds. So I think what we're working to do is to make sure that we're expanding access to the arts, visual and performing, as well as in addition to making sure that when we're talking about performing arts, that we're being equitable in providing the resources, instruments the students need to be able to build in their arts education. Media centers. Part of what you articulated in our policy ADA is the importance of maximizing or leveraging our media centers, and doing that through having a person who's working in the media center to maximize that opportunity. What you see here is our ability thus far to be able to make sure there's someone working in the media center who's both credentialed and full-time. That has been a challenge, and we can certainly talk about the challenges to fulfilling that commitment and things that we've done to do so. Going from left to right, you can see the majority of our media centers, about 60%, are filled with a certified media coordinator. It's about 6% or 6.5% to 7% are by a certified teacher, and then a non-certified staff person who's full-time in 21% of our media centers. And we still have about 12% of our media centers who either have someone who is part-time or it's understaffed. So there's work we have to do here, but it's an investment that we've started to make based on your policy direction. There's a number of things that we begin to do to be able to increase our library holdings, to improve the print collections, to make sure that they're not only represent a diversity of backgrounds, but a diversity of authors, to be able to let that be accessible electronically, which is particularly important during this COVID-19 times, and as well to build a broad base of qualified media coordinators. We're competing not just with neighboring districts, not just across the state, but across the country with a finite number of individuals who have these media coordinator certifications, and we're always competing to get them. But to be honest, there's more demand than there is supply for those positions. So it's challenging for us to get those individuals in all of our schools. Lastly, cohort graduation rate. These data were shared publicly and shared with you earlier this month. What you see is that our four-year cohort graduation rate for the 2019-20 school year was flat at 85.5%. Each of the subgroups was comparable to what it was. In some cases, we saw some up, some down, but one particular area that has been a question is what's going on with the four-year cohort graduation rate of our Hispanic students, that they're lower than their subgroup peers, and our performance in CMS for this particular subgroup is lower than our neighboring districts. We have some insight into prior cohorts, Hispanic students in prior cohorts. We have not yet had a chance to delve deeply into this cohort. So certainly during the Q&A session, we can answer some questions about what we've seen in previous cohorts, but we need to do more examination about this cohort that just left us here. And with that, we like to welcome questions and discussions. I believe, Mr. Superintendent, Madam Chair, that we were going to take questions by section. There is a delegation of individuals in the other room because of social distancing requirements. We cannot all be here at this dais. So as we go section by section, individuals who can answer your questions are poised to, at your request, to come in and for as long as you'd like, answer any questions or engage whatever dialogue you'd have. Madam Chair, Mr. Superintendent.
Thank you. So I guess, can you back the slide up to the first section? I'm going to see who has questions for that.
No, I'm good. And so we could start with, Madam Chair, may I suggest curriculum?
I guess, did anybody have any questions on this? Oh, Ms. Shipp.
Yeah, I don't know if this is where the question would come when we talk about on grade level. I know we moved into the new EL curriculum especially in our fourth and fifth graders. So as we talk about on grade level, I think my question would be about professional development. Because I think in order for things to, when you talk about the levels and how we move students, we need to ensure that teachers and staff have the kind of training that they need to be able to present that curriculum. So I think my concern would be where are we at in making sure that teachers are trained. And I know this may even go into advanced courses as well, but the level of training that we're providing, I heard you mention that is something you're looking at, but I think that's critical for how we look at curriculum, the level of training, and where we are with this professional development. You rolled out fourth and fifth grade EL. Where are we at with professional development and making sure teachers are able to present this level of instruction in the way we need it?
Thank you for that thoughtful question. Good evening, everybody. As you might remember, I'm sure that you do, that about a few months ago, this board passed a school district calendar that was incredibly strategic about the placement of specific teacher planning days. And we have earmarked 8 of those teacher planning days to be specific to curriculum supports, teacher professional development, not just for teachers that are adopting the curriculum, but also for other subject areas, advanced placement courses, our world language offerings, our music and the arts. We have now direct access to provide up to 48 hours of professional development annually for our teachers that we simply did not have the strategy for prior to this year as a result of how we were utilizing our district calendar and our time. We've had 2 days of professional development so far this year in August, and we are spirited to have our 3rd day of professional development in the month of October. Something that I'd like us to be mindful of is in this environment, while we're also grappling with the pandemic, we're also learning to be incredibly flexible with our professional development and building it digitally so our teachers have the opportunity to participate in our professional development that we are offering in partnership with them asynchronously, which means it's not necessarily just designed for one particular teacher planning day. Now it's flexible in terms of the amount of time that they're investing and how often that they are participating in it. And we're trying to make sure that we're also scheduling the PD in alignment with the scope and sequence of the course. We're learning. I think that is something that we can continue to do moving forward, regardless of the modality of instruction, in terms of how we can leverage technologies to access our teachers moving forward in new and innovative ways. But we have a significant portion of time this year that we did not have last year, and we're really grateful for that.
And I don't know, if I'm probably not on the right slide to talk about access in terms of high school AP, IB courses. Is that another slide? Okay, then I'll
Yeah, I
wait.
think that's another section. You want to wait
I'll
for
come
that?
back.
Okay, Mr. Shul?
I just had one question about how the access to on-grade level curriculum relates to the performance. So was there an increase in EOC scores based off of the new phased-in curriculum?
Mr. That's a good question. We just rolled out the new curricula last year.
Oh, okay.
Our testing regimen was interrupted, so we don't know what relationship there might be. We'll be looking kind of what our overall experience is. I will say that in our earlier years, you may not see a one-to-one relationship with the teaching of the curriculum to immediate performance bumps, but we're looking at over time that we'll be able to see that, which is why we started in the earlier grades, because it will be cumulative, the impact of being able to have that exposure.
Mm-hmm. And then next I was to ask about the MTSSS and strategically expanding the K through 8 curriculum into high school. Is there a timeline for when that might happen?
So 2 pieces to that. First, because I think there are 2 components of your question. One was MTSS. We were successfully able this year to identify a standard treatment protocol for interventions for all grades K through 12 in English as well as mathematics. What that means in prior years is that if students were dealing with not necessarily responding to core instruction well, and teachers needed to identify and put interventions in place to see if students were responding appropriately or we needed to change interventions, those things varied school to school across the district. In some instances, we offered a menu of options and schools were left to procure those individual options, and it wasn't necessarily a standard. That's not the case anymore. We have a new standard treatment protocol for literacy as well as mathematics across the district beginning this year, and are continuing to develop school leads as well as teachers on how to utilize those interventions appropriately in compliance with new state policy. The second question was around high school curriculum and those efforts. We anticipate this year to begin not only engaging students and teachers internally in our system, but also the community at large around the types of books and texts that we should be reading in our high school English courses, as well as the type of curriculum that should be at the center of our math classrooms. High school English and high school math is on the top of our radar as an opportunity to engage people thoughtfully, where we may not necessarily buy a solution, but identify the text that we want at the center of our courses and build units in partnership with our teachers, as well as explore various curricula that is available for Math 1, Math 2, and Math 3. That is a slow process, but we've already begun having preliminary conversations with members of our community as well as teachers and staff around that effort, but we're looking to ensure that we can position ourselves financially as a system to be able to take on a portion of that in the year ahead. That may be one course, one English course, English 1 or Math 1, but it needs to be thought of as a multi-year effort, similarly to what Dr. Barnes articulated earlier with our K-8 implementation. We're in 2 years. We've gone actually a little bit faster as a result of your incredible governance, but this was really meant to be a 3-year effort. And it should also continue to be thought of that way in terms of the professional development that's required to see the change efforts that on behalf of our teachers and students in our buildings.
That makes sense. So technically, we're already within that effort if we're in that
Yes, sir.
piece of engaging. Okay. Thank you.
Any more questions before we move on to the next section? Okay.
Madam Chair.
Oh, sorry, Mr. Strain.
It's okay, thanks. It's difficult with our
I
layout
know it's the
here.
peripheral.
Yeah, so firstly, thank you. As Dr. Jones is not with us this evening, I'll speak up for something that she raises rightly every session, which is this is an incredibly important topic, and it's a topic that runs through everything we do in this district. And so I appreciate the report. And on this particular topic with regards to academics, really, I had 2 questions in this first section. One is around the ability to track a cohort, because if I'm understanding much of this, our first real checkpoint is EOGs at the end of 3rd grade, for really checking to see where our students and that cohort of students and all of the various subgroups within it stand up against our expectations, right? And so when we talk about performance here, these are standardized tests, there's expectations in terms of content mastery, and we're checking against those. And that's really what we're referring to here. And so my question comes, first of all, that's my understanding, please confirm. But secondly, with regards to that, looking at 3rd grade, is there any way to track cohort performance between kindergarten entry assessments and 3rd grade EOGs, to be able to look at how we are impacting that cohort of students as they matriculate through over a 4-year period with us, right? Kindergarten, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. Your EOG is 3rd, so they've been with us 4 years, between their kindergarten entry assessments and 3rd grade EOGs.
Mr. King, may I begin and we tag you? So the answer to your first question, there's different assessments that we use, some of which are summative, which are the end of grade assessments, which are for accountability purposes, the EOGs, EOCs. In this instance, yes, the end of grade assessment is the first summative assessment we have. We have a couple of different options, though, we do look at to inform how we support students. One of those are assessments embedded in the curricula as part of either Envision 2020, L curriculum, which is English Language Arts, Envision 2020, which is K-5 mathematics, or Open Up. Mr. King's going to talk more about those in just a moment, so we can use those to support our instruction. And we also have this universal screener, which is part of our multi-tiered system of supports. That universal screener we begin giving in kindergarten, and we could use that monitoring a cohort, if you will, not just a grade span, but those students who stay as a contiguous cohort.
Right.
And we could be able to look at that. I would say we probably would want to stay consistent with the assessment, say, looking at their performance in a universal screener over time, or be able to look at that experience of the universal screener. In English language arts in third grade, we have a beginning of grade assessment. It's almost like a pretest, if you will. That's very close in its look to the EOG. It's administered by the state as well. And we could use that also to look at progress in that third grade year. So yes, we can look at a cohort. Yes, third grade would be the first year we would have a summative assessment, but there are other instruments we use to inform how we support students.
So Brian, can you just help me out with the kindergarten entry assessment as well? I mean, I understand it's possible statement in terms of we could identify that cohort and track specifically those individuals who have been with us 4 years and those who haven't. But also, is there any way to use that kindergarten entry assessment to the extent that it's sort of a standardized assessment in order to evaluate and assess the progress we're able to make with kids based on that kindergarten entry assessment as well?
I think so. I think the complexity that we're dealing with as a state right now through our Read to Achieve legislation is that beyond the kindergarten readiness assessment and any of the embedded assessments that are in our pre-K curriculum has played out differently over the last 3 years, whether it's M-Class, iStation, MAP assessments. And in many instances prior to last year, there was not a standard curriculum at the center of that instruction either. So I really empathize with our families, our teachers, our school principals, and our students in those particular scenarios, because the various data sets that we're looking at are not necessarily developed by the same research. I think we are poised and well-positioned to think about that differently moving forward, because we do have a standard regardless of the state policy changes, that we do anticipate another change forthcoming a year from now, that we have a constant with our curriculum, our embedded assessments in our curriculum. One of the strengths of our newly adopted curriculum is it's a knowledge-building curriculum. If we want to know how children are progressing in their literacy development, it really comes down to words, their vocabulary, their active vocabulary. And as you are interacting with our families and our teachers, you are probably hearing about the different themes and topics that our modules and units are focused on. That's intentional, it's by design. While the embedded assessments will help assess students' ability to use words within the context of those themes and knowledge, what's important about these other sets of assessments, whether it's the MAP testing, the EOC testing, the other former and future Read to Achieve assessments, is that it helps us get a better sense of how children are transferring their use of those words from one context to a new context. And that's incredibly important as we think about college and career readiness. So it's not just, I want to make sure that as I leave the podium, that it's not just about the embedded assessments. That's an incredible, important point. But it's thinking about how these things work together. Where I think that there are challenges is that from a state perspective, we've led with the assessment without all of the infrastructures and the resources for assessment to be meaningful. And I think our district has rapidly and aggressively begun to solve that. So it's about content, it's about teacher knowledge and teacher skill, it's about the role that students are playing in their learning, and then the assessment becomes meaningful because we have all three of those aspects of the instructional core covered. That hasn't been the case previously in the last few years, and I'm grateful for your thoughtful leadership in helping us get to a healthy place there.
Mr. Stern, can I make one distinction?
Of course, of course.
Is that,
always, Dr. Barnes.
is that what Mr. Kingsley acknowledged was the utility of the assessments that we have. There was an assessment that was called the Kindergarten Entry Assessment, the KEA. It's now called something else, and I haven't committed to memory what the new name is. That particular state assessment, the Kindergarten Entry Assessment, is not necessarily a standard assessment. It's more of a standardized protocol. And those data aren't easily aggregatable to be able to follow in that way. But we do have other, say, kindergarten readiness assessments that Mr. Kingsley mentioned that we could use. But I wanted to distinguish between that specific assessment and other assessments we might have in our arsenal, if you will.
Yeah, and certainly we don't need to be inventing more assessments for the sake of assessments and so that we can have data. If we can't use them to meet our kids' needs better, then then we shouldn't be doing them. And I know a lot of those are imposed by federal or state statute, but certainly we often talk about the extent to which we test. But my other point on this was this is summative, I think was the word, if I'm picking up from you, Dr. Barnes, as I try to. There's also part of this performance that is the extent to which we meet a student where they are and lift them. And so I wonder, I'm obviously trying to stay away from a word here that didn't appear in this report that I use all the time, but meeting kids where they are and being able to lift them as high as they can. Where does that feature in this? I think it's very important in terms of individual needs and meeting kids where they are, in terms of our definition of equity, because that's where it really gets to, where you're meeting the needs of an individual child. So how can we assess our ability and in fact our performance against meeting that high standard?
Mr. Strain, you are artful at leading the witness. And I say that affectionately, as hope you know.
Dr. Barnes, we've been doing this a while together.
Is what you're probably referring to, Mr. Strain, is the state's educator value added assessment system. What the state had started doing in 1819, I believe, was to be able to release those data by subgroup, although not for individual students. So what could be incorporated in future reports around this is to be able to say by subgroup is to look at anywhere from, say, whether we were meets, not meets, exceeds that subgroup in the aggregate by subject. We could do something like the number of schools by grade span that met either by subgroup, and we could be able to provide some snapshot of that by disaggregated by subgroup. I think that's well within the bounds of what we could do.
Appreciate that.
Yes, I'm sorry. So,
I believe there's really good intentions when we as a community of educators, myself included, use the phrase meeting people where they're at and stretching them. I've used it in my own career, self-admittingly. And I think as a result of that, what I have made as a mistake previously, and I challenge us as a community to think differently, is when we are leading with meeting people where they're at mentally, it has to do with our habits, our mindsets, and our beliefs about what kids and adults can and can't do. And the resources that we've invested in are so incredibly important, because what we recognize that if we believe, or if we're meeting students who are not necessarily at grade level yet in terms of an end-of-year assessment that may be filled with biases itself, we're never giving them the chance or the opportunity in some instances for them ever to receive a standards-aligned level of instruction. And where our journey started 2 years ago was just there, in terms of recognizing the percentage of students across this community that were actually accessing grade level performance and grade level curriculum and grade level teaching each and every day. And that is not an indictment on any of our teachers. That was a result of us not being able to be positioned to invest in high quality curriculum, to invest in the deep professional development that our teachers need post their post-secondary education in order to access the content in new and meaningful ways with their students. So I understand, I think teachers, and like I said, myself as well, have used that phrase, but I think it's a trap for many of our students to never ever get access to the deep, rich, meaningful text and learning experiences that students across all of our districts really benefit from. And our strategic plan, the power of it, is built around the instructional core and making sure that all of our students, regardless of where they are, have access to standards-aligned instruction, and we help teachers build the scaffolds that are necessary for our students to access grade level instruction and not think that we can intervene our way to higher graduation rates, higher college and career readiness rates. And I just think it's important for that context as we think about learning and moving forward in the future, but also, you know, in some instances with our teachers, there's some unlearning that needs to take place because we told them to teach people where they're at. And that, again, is something that we have to kind of undo and redo and think differently about the research. And I'm really proud to be a part of this school system whose professional development efforts are to do just that. So I thought it was important to share that. Thank you.
So, Mr. Kingsley, I would add, if I could, that we also have to meet kids where they are when they're ahead of grade level. So you spoke to not, you spoke to making sure that we're lifting kids to where they need to be. And I fully support that. And I know that you also support, if kids are a year or two ahead, we also need to meet them where they are and make sure that we continue to challenge them every day.
Don't disagree with that at all.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, any more for this section before we move on to the advanced coursework section?
Questions for that one?
Right, so this is where we talked about advanced coursework, participation, AB, or AP, IB.
This is where I was.
Ms. Shipp?
Oh, okay. Yeah, because I was bringing this up before. When we talk about advanced coursework, again, this is an area where, across the district, we take a look at, and I'm going to talk about some numbers here. For example, when we looked at IB, let's just use IB curriculum, and we looked at schools like Myers Park, who had 72.3% of the kids doing well in IB. East Meck had 67%, 67.5%, and North Meck had 57.8%. My question here would be the equity in how we have these programs across the district. And I think that's important. I have worked with children in the advanced placement programs. I was an LITD principal, and I also had a student my own child that was advanced. And I really had an opportunity to work with some high school students that were advanced students. And what I heard and I knew is that these programs were different at each school. Like IB at North Meck, courses were maybe not as rigorous or the same as they were at Myers Park, or at that time even Hardin or West Charlotte. So my question here, as we talk about equity too, is making sure as we look at these advanced placement courses, we have the ability to have master teachers throughout these schools, and they are trained to be able to provide these courses. For example, there were situations where you have calculus, and there's only one teacher who's able to teach IB calculus at a school, and so maybe another school is offering something somewhat different as a part of the requirement for IB to complete IB courses or graduate as an IB student. And so these are some of the concerns I have, and I want to know how we're working towards this to ensure that we do provide strong advanced coursework for all students at all of these high schools.
As I mentioned earlier, there's a small cadre of individuals from the academics division who wants to be able to address all your questions. So I want to welcome a couple of my colleagues to the podium to be able to answer those items and others.
Good evening. Ms. Shipp, I really appreciate your question, particularly as it relates to IB. I do want to address the teacher question first. So we certainly are fortunate to be funded in the district to provide professional development for all of our IB teachers. As Dr. Barnes mentioned earlier, it is often a scheduling challenge, and so we have to work with our schools to make sure that students and teachers and content are matched appropriately in the master schedule, and when that happens, we are able to provide teachers with the professional development that's needed. And that's certainly a much more of a challenge in schools where that IB cohort is much smaller. And so we have to grow those programs in all of our schools so that you have a critical mass of students taking each course. As it relates to parity across the programs, that has been the primary focus of the Magnet Office for the past 2 years. When I joined the district, the focus of the Magnet Office was growing access, so quickly increasing the number of programs. And we quickly needed to shift from that to ensuring the quality of those programs. As it relates to International Baccalaureate, the past 2 years, we've been working closely with our middle school IB coordinators and teachers, doing group walkthroughs in each other's schools, doing coordinated planning and PLCs across those middle schools so that we have students more prepared going into the high school programs. It is our intent this year to replicate that work at the high school level, working with our high school IB coordinators and teachers in that same fashion.
Thank you, because I
Yes,
think
ma'am.
that's so important that we can have that consistency in our programs.
Yes, ma'am.
I think that's it for me now.
Ms. Sawyer?
Hi, I had a question on the underrepresentation of Hispanic and Latino students in the TD program and what strategies you have to address that. Flip.
So with the Learning Immersion Talent Development Program, it is a magnet program. So Advanced Studies Department has been working really closely with the magnet department as well to really be looking at that magnet theme just across the school as a whole. So making sure that all students, not just students who are magneted into the school, but all students who are enrolled in that school are having the opportunity to experience learning and enrichment electives and different pieces of that Learning Immersion Talent Development Program that would allow them to have that opportunity. With respect to any type of access or recruitment, I think probably Akeisha would be able to better answer that particular question.
Ms. Sawyer, I would say that our Latino students are underrepresented across several of our magnet programs. And in response to that, over the past couple of years, our marketing efforts in Latino communities where there's a high concentration of families of Latino descent has been really concentrated in a grassroots effort. So partnering with organizations where families may already be socializing or accessing services, also advertising in Spanish radio and Spanish print media as well, because that is a group that we have seen over the past couple of years, actually, that have been underrepresented across a number of our magnet programs, and an area where we need to see improvement.
Thank you. I also had a question about the 10 AP classes, and I'm so glad that those are back in all our high schools as a baseline. I know that some high schools have nearly 3 times that number, but 10 is a place to start. Are these all taught by live teacher courses, or are these take online classes?
Sure. So the 10 core AP courses are taught by live teachers, and those are were required for our comprehensive high schools. So our larger, there's 20, the larger comprehensive high schools. Some of our smaller high schools were not able to necessarily offer all 10 of the core AP courses, in which case they do have options for online. I do want to bring up 2 additional access programs that are.
Is
Yeah, go ahead.
Garinger considered a comprehensive large high school, or are you talking like IMEC?
Yep, Garinger would be considered a comprehensive large high school. And so in addition to that, we know that there are schools that offer many more than those 10, and not every school is offering every AP course, right? That's something that we're aware of. So we've really looked for just alternative methods to offer more AP courses to more students that may not be offered at their exact school. So there are 2 programs, one that was mentioned earlier tonight, the 5th Block AP program. So that's designed to be open to any CMS student who is currently attending a school that does not offer one of those 5th Block AP courses, and they can enroll in that 5th Block AP course. Those are taught by CMS teachers. It's new this year, so I will say it's in its infancy program, and it's going to be dependent on student enrollment, but we have 5 really incredible AP teachers that are ready to teach those courses. Those would be taught remotely, but there would be live remote live instruction, right? Like virtual live instruction from our AP teachers that are teaching those courses. So that's one strategy.
During the school day or outside the school?
That would be outside of the school day. So students could take that as an additional course on top of the courses that they're taking. They could also take it similar to how they would take like an NCVPS course, where they may have like a block of time in their day where they're working on their asynchronous stuff, and then they would just attend the live session during fifth block. So that's one. The other that we've had some schools take advantage of this year because of our remote setting is what we're calling AP cross enrollment. So this is an opportunity where students from one school can actually cross enroll and take a course with another school, just be added to that section of a course. And so we have had schools take advantage of that this year, even though, you know, the start of school was a little bit crazy. They were able to pair up and make sure that students had those access points. And so that came into play in a lot of cases where you may have 4 or 5 students that are really interested in a course that's not offered at that school. So maybe 5 students are interested in AP biology. They don't have access to it at their school. They enrolled in a school that did have that course and had space for those students to take it.
About how many students were able to participate in that? I know it's a first year, and how did they find out about it? How was that coordinated?
Yeah, great questions. So I don't have the exact number, and I don't want to misquote. That is information I can get to you. However, the way that that schools were able to connect students was really through their assistant principal, their counselor, someone who was aware of students' interest in a particular course was then able, I kind of served as the conduit to, you know, let schools know. It also came into play if a school lost a teacher, which we know staffing can be a challenge. So if they lose a teacher at the last minute, and they only had 8 kids enrolled in a course, which does sometimes happen with AP, they were often able then to pair those students up with another school to take the course. We've had schools take advantage of it also while they're finding a teacher. So in that case, they're not actually truly cross-enrolled, but they're taking advantage of the learning from another school. So I had a school call me up. They were working on finding an AP calculus teacher, which is not necessarily a simple thing. And so they had 11 students, and we were able to pair them up with a school that's offering that course at the exact same time. So it happened to be 2A, I think. And they are now engaging in the remote instruction, the synchronous instruction with that instructor at the other school. And schools have been really great about just being open to those partnerships and you know, providing those opportunities. We have students who were in an AP capstone program, which is a 2-year program, AP seminar and AP research. If they transfer schools, they may not have access to that because that's not offered everywhere. So we've had where our capstone schools are willing to take, you know, students that want to finish their program. So really see this, again, it's in its infancy stages. It's not something that, you know, had come up as a potential opportunity until now. And so we've, you know, utilized this disruption as an opportunity to provide additional access in those ways.
That's great.
And then I did want to hit on one thing that was brought up earlier about AP training that I didn't get a chance to speak to before. So we have been offering AP training for many more teachers than previously was offered. So for example, in the summer of 2018, I think there were 45 AP teachers trained. In the summer of 2019, we trained over 160. Just to see the comparison, and then over 120 this past summer. And so that includes new AP teachers along with teachers who needed sort of retraining after 5 years for new curriculum and things of that nature. We've also have an incredible group of AP lead teachers in place that have been working with their cohort of teachers. And so we have, for example, 2 AP lead teachers I was just on a call with earlier today that are calculus teachers. And they work together to make sure that all the AP calculus teachers are gaining support ongoing throughout the school year. So of course they lead professional learning with them, but I think more importantly, they're the go-to people for questions, or how are you approaching this lesson? Or does anyone have a resource for this particular thing? Or my students are having trouble with, you know, some part of AP calculus. And so that's been really a positive thing as well.
I just want to say, are they equally distributed across the district in terms of these teachers that you're training and hiring?
Yes, and in fact, we made special sort of opportunities for schools to do what we called build their bench. And so this is where a school who typically maybe has a little bit higher of a turnover rate can actually ask to train more teachers, even if they're not set to teach an AP course just yet, just so that they have someone in place that is trained in the case that they may lose a staff member. And so we did have schools take advantage of that. What we found is that actually is really powerful in with respect to vertical alignment. So if you have an English 2 teacher and they're gaining AP English 3 training, they're actually better at teaching English 2 and making sure that kids get what they need for that AP course. So it has sort of a win-win with respect to that.
Ms. Marshall?
You can just stay there, because that's great. 10 years ago, I was standing at the podium as a parent advocate, asking for this very thing. We didn't have the technology then, on being able to cross-enroll from different high schools as we were trying to merge some programs. And this is just wonderful to see that come full circle. So while we're getting a lot of emails about disappointments and struggles, and it's really hard, I think particularly, we all know this for our elementary school students in remote learning, and certainly for all our students. I've got a daughter in grad school who's struggling with this too, but I think this is a silver lining in terms of access and the ability for us to offer things that we could not do with having kids move around the county. This is just wonderful. So I'm so excited. And I also think that the silver lining of being able to quickly access your peers in another school in terms of the professional development is so quick. So I think that's something that hopefully we'll continue to do no matter what scenario. And we will all get back to school one day. We are working there. So anyway, just always want to say that. I want to ask, again, I'm so excited about that, but the Access 2024, the broadened definition of the AP potential, I know we're talking a lot about AP, IB, advanced classes. I would hope and I would imagine that this is also to push those students from standard levels into honors. Can you speak to that and how that process is going?
Sure. So one of the things that we've noted actually is that increase in AP, sometimes you would actually see a decrease in honors, right? Because kids who normally would have taken honors are now moving up to AP. But what we've seen over the past 2 years is a 2.5% increase in AP and a 1.5% increase in honors, which I think is interesting. It shows that there's actually that sort of progression. And I 100% agree with you, right? So students moving, from their standard course to their honors course are more prepared typically to then move into their AP course. So one of the pieces that I mentioned earlier about just opening up training to allow for more teachers, whether they're standard or honors, to have access to sort of that higher level training like AP is one strategy behind that.
I would really encourage us to pedal to the metal, and I know you all are, on that particular standard to honors piece. And I think that Math 1 in the 8th grade as a pathway is so imperative, and that opens all kinds of doors. So really excited about that and want to do everything we can to support that. So that's all I have for this section.
Ms. Byers-Bailey, I think you had your hand up, and I'm
Yes.
off my game, so I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. That's all right. I'm interested about, we have LITD in elementary schools to identify students that we think are gifted and or advanced. We also have IB elementary schools as well. Do they have the same opportunity to advance or identify and advance students and are they students that come out of an IB elementary school treated the same as the students that come out of an LITD school?
In terms of their
Ability to go into advanced courses, IB or AP?
Sure, yeah. And so we don't have anything in place that limits advanced coursework based on their choice of magnet program, that I'm aware of. And so if a learning immersion talent development student moves on to middle school, they would still have access. There isn't a learning immersion talent development program at the middle school level, but those students would have access then to take honors coursework and things of that nature. I know our IB coursework is honors level coursework as well, so there wouldn't be anything in place that would stop a student from taking advanced courses. I think Akeisha will also. Yeah.
Ms. Myers-Bailey, I'm not sure if you're referring specifically to magnet continuation.
Yeah.
So our elementary LITD students, as well as our elementary International Baccalaureate students, both have continuation to middle school and high school IB programs. We do not have a middle school LITD program specifically, but those students do have automatic continuation to middle school IB.
Okay, and so they do, I guess I'm trying to distinguish between what the the TD student in an elementary school receives in terms of enrichment versus the student in an IB elementary school to prepare them for the IB middle school.
Yeah, there are two slightly just, different approaches to providing students with access to rigor, and certainly that happens in both the LITD program as well as the IB program, IB being very prescriptive about the IB standards and attributes that then teachers work into the curriculum. But both programs build on the district's now adopted curriculum, K-5, and we've both been very intentional in our work with LITD as well as IB teachers in helping them integrate the two.
All right, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Delahara?
Yeah, just a quick, I guess more of a comment, maybe it's not even a question. I know you mentioned the efforts, because I also had the same concern about the disparity in the LITD program with our Hispanic students, and you mentioned that oftentimes you're doing the marketing through organizations that are already working with the Latino community, and also Spanish language radio. And I don't know, I didn't necessarily hear that those were new initiatives, but things that had already been in the works. And I would just like to recommend that you work to think through maybe some new and different approaches of what could be done, reaching out to the community, and also think about the way things are translated, because sometimes I see things that come out translated, and it's one thing to translate certain words, but if you don't have a background knowledge, like even inviting someone to the magnet fair, and it gets translated as the magnet fair, well, there's an understanding that many of us take for granted of what even a magnet is. And so when that word just gets translated out of context, sometimes I think that it gets lost in translation, literally. And so I would just think to work with, a team to really think more specifically about sometimes not just translating exact documents, but giving background content that helps get the deeper message when working with international community. So it was just an idea.
Thank you for that. It's very helpful. Thank you.
Mr. Schul?
Thank you. And first, I just think it should be said that there's a nuance and thoroughness in this report that I find extremely admirable. So thank you for that. So first, I wanted to talk about generally with the AP and IB scores, and as they're broken by subgroup. Have we had any thought about the possibility of comparing those with College Board or IB or state level scores?
Mr. Schul, could you say a bit more? I don't think I understand.
Right. So to my knowledge, I think the College Board collects similar data when we're talking about dividing scores by subgroup.
SAT?
No, AP exam.
Okay, I'm with you.
Yeah. So I was wondering if we'd given any thought about finding that data and comparing it.
We do look at some measures, we'll say with advanced placement, the College Board assessment, being able to compare that in different jurisdictions. In this instance, we were trying to focus on different subgroups. If it would be helpful to be able to help us look at ourselves, to be able to think about subgroups around, say, district, state, national, that's certainly something we can do.
Mm-hmm. I think that might be helpful. And then I wanted to start talking about, I think, the importance of how we go into the registration process specifically for advanced coursework, because I think from a student perspective, a lot of the times the fact of getting a registration card and initiating that process can be pretty intimidating for parents and students alike. And I say that because I think it's really important that we have access to AP and IB fairs. That is a way for teachers of AP and IB to present to parents and students about what the nuances of their courses are, and if they think what they think a student should have to meet that standard of rigor. So are those AP fairs widely accessible? Have we done a job marketing them widely?
I would say it varies from school to school. Some schools have it as a standing tradition. Other schools are just beginning that kind of process. But I think, Mr. Schull, what you're mentioning and what Stella Hara mentioned are of the same ilk, in which these can't be, we'll build it and hope some families show up or some students ask for it. That we have to do aggressive pull in and push in campaigns to let families know about this. And we also have to think about not trying to assess a student's capability, but assess our communication about the option. But I found that some families grapple with, Ms. Stella Hara, I was thinking about this as you were mentioning it, is some families and some students don't think of themselves as gifted or ready for extra challenge. And that is farthest from the truth. So we don't just need to, Mr. Schull, to exactly your point, is to do touch face-to-face, not touching COVID-19 touching, but you all know what I mean. You know what I mean. But we need to do high-touch opportunities like fairs to be able to let students know this is available and recruit them to come in, and in some cases ask them to opt out of those opportunities. I want to hold up one example. Independence High School, before COVID, had exactly that type of opportunity, and Myers Park had something comparable where it wasn't just AP, it was AP, IB, CTE. It was even dual enrollment programs, and in some cases it was even talking about ROTC and JROTC opportunities. So I think there has to be that kind of way we're trying to draw in folks and trying to use every communication mechanism we have.
Well, absolutely. And I'm sure you know more than I do about the complexities and nuances that's going into like all these communication efforts. I think though still that a starting point is that we have these AP and IB fairs available for any member of the community, and then we can start from there, from communicating and marketing towards specific communities. I say that because a lot of the schools which have a high level of people in these advanced courses are because it's a social norm for kids, just like you were talking about. It's an expectation for kids to be gifted and an expectation for a lot of these kids to enroll in these courses. But when we have these AP fairs, I think it gives students, one, a way to have a more intimate connection with the teachers who are actually going to be teaching, and two, it provides them an understanding of all the other students who might be possibly interested in the same rigor that they are. And then thirdly, I think it's really important that we start those efforts in 8th grade, because the registration process for getting into high school, understanding things like GPA and how things are weighed, becomes especially intimidating when you're a 9th grader in the middle of your year understanding these things, rather than when you're in middle school and you already have an understanding before you register. So then also I wanted to talk about something that I thought about from Ms. Shipp's question, which was that can we anticipate any data on teacher retention specifically in AP and IB courses?
I'm going to hand things over to my colleague to talk about if we have any of those data.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't have that data right now, but if it would be helpful, that's something we can begin to track, because teachers are hired and staffed at their school. And so our function is really to provide the training that they need, the support that they need. That hasn't been a data point that we have tracked traditionally, but it's something that if that would be helpful insight, we can certainly begin to track that so that we have some insight on just where we're seeing maybe more or less retention with respect to our advanced placement teachers.
Mm-hmm. I think it would, because that again goes into developing a school culture of an expectation of high rigor once you have teachers that are consistently there that parents and families have become to know. And then I wanted to talk about when we're going into Access 2024, I think one of the points was discussions on implicit bias, and you mentioned that this is going to be involved in professional development as long as direct discussions with students. So I wanted to ask, is it possible that we make this a district-wide part of curriculum where teachers are engaging these conversations and talking about implicit bias at the very beginning of the year? Because I think uniquely in advanced coursework where you've got a lot of discussion-based models, that implicit bias really does lend itself to making students feel as if their voice isn't equal to others.
Yes, yes, and yes. I think what we found with this first initiative is that part of trying to create increased access is we had to take on both students' biases about themselves and adults' biases about students. that we're sorting and keeping people out of programs, either students' attitudes or adults' attitudes. I think what we've found from this experience and others is being able to integrate these types of efforts with the actual work that adults are doing. And we will certainly talk about that more when we're talking about out-of-school suspensions and in-school suspensions as well. But I think that's certainly where we're going, and we're in the first phases of that. I want to acknowledge some work that Mr. Winston has just started this year in helping us think about what does it mean to be against racism, anti-racist in our practices, and being able to help us integrate our thoughts about that as we're thinking about being able to provide a high-quality education to all of our students.
Thank you. And I would say that outside of discussions of implicit bias about registering for courses, I'd also add within those courses themselves, are we providing literature that is diverse and tolerant, and making sure that we have an environment that is just as inclusive as registering for the course in the first place. And then my last question was, there was mention, I think again under Access 2024, about expanding opportunities for tutoring sessions and engaging those and figuring those out within teaching schedules. Could you elaborate a little bit more about what expanding tutoring would look like and how we could be helping?
So the reference to tutoring on the slide was really to just highlight the work of our AP teachers as they're working together. Many of them are offering tutoring sessions that are open to any students in the district. So you may be hopping into a tutoring session with a different teacher, and that's just to allow both different perspectives, different voices around the same content, but also because they're working so closely together on their AP courses, they're able to do that. So we have courses like AP Chemistry, AP US History that I know are offering those shared tutoring sessions that I think is a real step in the right direction.
Because I think there's an opportunity there, especially with what Ms. Marshall was talking about in cross-enrollment, and how we could also have cross-enrollment within tutoring sessions that lends itself to much easier schedules, I would think, as well.
Yes, that's exactly what I was talking about.
Okay.
So that's currently happening in some AP courses. I wouldn't say all yet, but they are working. As the teachers are working more closely together, they're able to then offer those tutoring sessions that are more, that are cross schools.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, should we move on to CTE? Sawyer?
A couple questions. On slide 62, should be a couple ones down, it shows the certificates by school. And there are fairly large disparities among some schools.
Yes.
What surrounds those?
Yeah. There are a couple of schools that stand out in particular because they are listed at less than 5%. And so I imagine that you're talking about some of those. As I look at 3 of those 4 schools in particular, those are schools that had a number of CTE programs whose relevance was fading. And they were offering courses that did not terminate in certificate programs or that were articulated to 2- and 4-year degrees. And so Susan Gann, who's the director of CTE over the past 2 years, has worked really closely with principals to phase out those programs and phase in more relevant programs that do terminate in certificates or articulate to 2- and 4-year degree programs. In a couple of those schools that are currently at less than 5%, those are programs like Fundamentals of Nursing, Game Art Design, Software Development. And what we see is that students are in the first 2 years of courses in those pathways, and oftentimes their certificates are associated with level 3 and 4 courses. So courses that we would expect students to be in their junior and senior years, and we just have not seen cohorts progress there yet. The other thing that I would offer is that students are not required to sit for the certification just because they take the course. It does not factor into their grade. We have seen a significant increase in the past 3 years of teachers giving the certification exam. So in 2015-16, we had 40 teachers giving CTE credential exams in their classrooms.
40. How many?
40.
40.
In 1819, we had almost 160. We have gone from about 1,700 credentials to about 8,600 credentials. So we're growing. We're still building a culture around the value of credentials. It's not just for students who intend to go right to work, but it is a proxy for rigor above and beyond the high school curriculum. So we continue to both build the pathways and the coursework that contribute to credential attainment, but also build a culture around credential attainment.
And the other question is, in looking at the handout with the middle school and
Yes.
high school courses, and just looking at most of them, the middle school feeder kind of aligns with the high school feeder at the high school. In the Geringer, the two middle school feeders have completely different arrays of CTE courses, and I'm wondering if that causes a problem in the high school where you don't have critical mass.
It absolutely does. And so I shared that document intentionally to show the work in progress of aligning our middle school feeders to our high school programs. And Geringer is one of those schools where over the past 2 years, we've phased out less relevant programs and phased in, things that are more relevant for today's economy. And so we also need to do that work in the middle schools as well.
Thank you.
Ms. Shipp?
Yes, I think this career and technical education and these pathways are so important to all of our students. And I think one of the concerns I have is that we still have students, and I actually experienced this and saw this with some high school students I'd worked with, leaving high school and they don't have a pathway. They graduate and they're out there right now, not working, not at CPCC, not in school at all, in terms of the pathway. So I'm really concerned about how we miss students in these high schools when it comes to these programs. We have career and technical education, but we have students that obviously did not get involved in this for whatever reason, and now they have graduated. So I want to know what all we can do, and I know I've heard some things, to make sure all students have a pathway by the time they get to 12th grade, and we know what's going to happen to them. Because to hear these students and to know some of these students that graduated and did not have a pathway is really disturbing to me, because that is the future when they graduate, and we know they're going to be able to make it in this world. So what are we doing where we're not tracking these students? We're missing these students in our high schools, and they're coming out without being connected. And I know this may be the counselors, this might be the teachers, but we really need to understand this, because we have career and technical education for those students not maybe going to college, but we're not even catching them, and they're coming out without a path.
Yeah, it's a great question, and it hits on a really significant need. I think the first part is awareness. And so to Gabe's question about fairs related to AP and IB, for the last few years, we've done a significant district-wide fair for CTE in Uptown, where we have all the schools, but we also have employers, so that students understand what a path in a particular sector might look like. And that opportunity has continued to grow. So the first part of it is awareness. I think also, too, is just an understanding. I think for a long time, CTE has been narrowly associated with students who intend to work directly out of high school. And that is certainly a path. But our CTE programs also articulate to 2-year degrees and 4-year degrees. And we want students to understand that no matter which path they take, there are multiple entry and exit points, and we want to prepare them for that. One of the challenges of shifting to this pathway strategy, which is absolutely the right strategy, is that it begins in the 9th grade. And so we've had to do work in parallel for those students who've already had their 9th and 10th grade opportunity. And so for that, we are partnering with employers to provide short-term training opportunities. So one program, for example, is called Road to Hire. which trains students in an after-school internship-like opportunity in software development pathways and leads to opportunities for work. We have to be able to grow those types of opportunities so that we can catch students who did not start in a CTE pathway in their 9th and 10th grade year.
Right, because I'm real concerned, I know, like, I'm just going to put out there, Olympic High School, for example, does a great job with making sure a lot of their students have those kind of internships, and they're not the only one, that when they leave, they know what that path is going to be, because they've already been involved in work throughout their high school experience. And I think that we just really have to be able to do this, because that's critical. And I think Dr. Barnes, I think you spoke about before this tracking with our counselors, being able to track our students for graduation, because I think we need to know when students graduate, like, what does that career and college readiness look like for every student that's coming out of school? Do we know how they're going to land, or at least their future, where are they going? So I think we need to work really hard on this one to ensure that these high school students are graduating with a future. And I know that CTE is a good path, but we need to make sure they're on a path. And I hope that we're continuing to have programs to do that. And I know we mentioned these fairs and that, but I also think those counselors, someone in that school has to be responsible for making sure every child is going to come out graduating, and they know, and we know where they're going.
Anybody else for CTE? Ms. Marshall?
Just real quick, I'm really glad that you included the alignment of the middle school, because that's so, I just think that's where we grow. It's almost too late to talk to a sophomore in high school and work out a master schedule and have them be a concentrator and be really successful with that.
That's right.
So I'm really glad you did that. And just for the public's knowledge, I think this is so cool, because there's so many incredible classes that you can even take as a middle schooler. And I had just circled a couple because I thought they were so cool. Like, there's an automation, robotics, app creators, all these things you can touch on in middle school, and that just sets you up so well for high school. So thank you guys for this intentionality. I just wanted to point that out. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Chief?
I'm going to add to what Ms. Marshall said. I had a former colleague, Richard McElrath, that served here on this board, and he was an adamant supporter of CTE, and I can't think that he would not be smiling upon us right now, especially the middle school pathways. That was something he talked about so many times, that we needed more than the art wheel, and we needed more than the language wheel. We needed the CTE wheel. And he and I both advocated really loudly for that beginning in 2009. And it just, as Ms. Marshall was speaking about the pathways, I had a vision of Richard in my head, and I just had to share that because he was such a tremendous advocate for this. And I have to see this, and I'm so thankful. I know his spirit is in this. And I know you know that as well.
Yes, I remember him well. So
Thank
yes,
you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Shall we move on? Thank you. Shall we move on to world languages?
It was that and
Who has the clicker?
Grocery stores. Adequate food. In high-poverty neighborhoods, those are his two things. And middle school feeders for CTE.
Our proud curriculum specialist for world languages, Ms. Mara Coe, will be joining us momentarily.
Great. Hello. Good evening. Any questions for world languages? Now that we've
Okay. Yeah, I have a question. I did not know about the Japanese Language School of Charlotte and the Hebrew High School and that partnership. Can you explain briefly how that works?
Absolutely. So since 1996, we've had an MOU in place with the Japanese Language School of Charlotte. It's a school that is sponsored by the Japanese government. And so students who are concurrently enrolled in CMS, but are also part of that Japanese language school, we now accept credits for them. So at first it was only 2 credits. It's evolved over the years. They can earn credits for advanced levels depending on what Japanese they're taking in the Japanese language school. Hebrew High, because of the shortness of their program per year, for every 2 years that the students enrolled in Hebrew High, they receive 1 credit for Hebrew, and it will count on their transcript as well. We have an additional MOU that I didn't put in the slides for the Bulgarian language school in Charlotte that we just entered into about 2 years ago. And we've had, I think, 2 students receive credits so far.
That's great. Thank you.
Sure.
Ms. Sawyer, and then Ms. Byers-Bailey.
Do you have, can you talk about participation at middle school or high school level of Spanish for native speakers? Do you have that in every middle school, in some middle schools?
It's a principal decision about how and when to offer it based on the number of students, the number of teachers they have, and interest. So currently we offer Spanish for native speakers across 36 of our schools between middle and high school. I would love to see it offered in a handful more. The participation is good, obviously where that is. The whole purpose of that pathway is for them to take the native speakers entry level, then the honors or the second level in the course. Then they would go directly into Honors 4 or IBSL 1 and into more advanced levels of Spanish. So I know Vance High School has made a fantastic pathway for a lot of their heritage speakers, and some other schools are following suit. South Mech does a fantastic job as well.
Ms. Byers-Bailey?
I guess that the mention of the Japanese Language School of Charlotte went right over my head when they first talked about it. Does kind of first-year Japanese student attend, or is there an entry? How much Japanese would you have to have as a prerequisite to attend the Japanese Language School of Charlotte?
Yes, ma'am. So because it is a Japanese government-run program, the majority of the students are children of Japanese businessmen who are here in the Charlotte area, sometimes temporarily, sometimes more long-term. So the students are usually heritage speakers or native speakers of Japanese. It's not necessarily open to a student who's just started to learn Japanese.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
I have a question about I think it's called the Star Talk program over the summer. Is that a formal partnership? Because I know there are quite a few students who take advantage of that.
So it's not formal. The Star Talk program, for those of us who may not be aware of that, that is a federally funded program. And Queen's University of Charlotte has had one for Chinese and then for a few years Arabic for over 10 years. There was also another program for students that was housed at Providence Day for 2 years. That program has not continued, unfortunately. App State has had programs as well that are more residential where the students stay overnight. So if the students do take those courses, again, because of the brevity of the program, we cannot offer high school credit, although they do earn at Queens, they have earned some college credit based on the proficiency assessments that they use in the program. That's as far as that goes. I have a connection with both of those programs. Unfortunately, the programs obviously were canceled this past summer.
Yeah.
And for this coming summer, there will not be any student programs either.
Too bad. It's a great opportunity.
Yes, ma'am.
Any other world language questions? All right, well, let's move on to visual and performing arts. Good to see you, Ms. Cove.
We have Dr. Mike Chilcutt, our Assistant Superintendent for Visual and Performing Arts. Good evening.
Good evening. Any questions here? Yes, Ms. Sawyer?
I have a question about access to the variety of arts within high schools especially. And it looks like you have a number of students enrolled on the slide 75, but do all our high schools offer theater arts, or only some high schools?
I believe most offer theater arts.
Does Garinger have theater arts? West Charlotte still have theater arts?
I'd have to get back to you. I believe West Charlotte does. I'm not sure about Garinger. I believe they do. Most schools do have theater arts or drama. Then we have also screenwriting at playwriting at two places.
Because I think there's one of, we support athletics. We have athletics at schools, but the sort of high school play, high school musical, that kind of activity has not happened at a lot of our high schools, or many of our high schools over time. And I'm saddened when that, we have schools that don't support those.
Yeah, last school year, we had approximately 213 different courses that had at least 10 kids in across the district. So what I've found is that most of this is driven by what the school, what the principal would like, what is based with the ADM, who they've hired there. We support every school that has it. So.
But there isn't a sort of baseline, not like we have with AP, that you have 10 AP classes that you also provide a variety of arts. It's just sort of up to the principal?
Well, it's a site-based decision. They're deciding with the school, and then what the feeder has going into the program, how they've decided to use their allotments for a drama teacher.
Okay. It's one of those things from an equity perspective that if we have a comprehensive high school, I find it disturbing that some comprehensive high schools are comprehensive and some aren't. And that's why in this report, we've asked for school by school, not just sort of, we offer lots of theater, but is that theater, is that art, is that chorus, is that band offered throughout the district?
I can get you all that information down to the course, down to the school if you'd like. I just don't want to give you numbers off the top of my head that aren't correct.
But I think that's the kind of information that I want to make sure that we lift up, to make sure that no matter where you live in this county, if you go to a comprehensive high school, you can expect some basic high school things, and that includes the arts.
Yep. Yep.
Ms. Sawyer, thank you for raising it up. I think to that point is what we have is a level of stress on our high schools that we're going to have to grapple with to be able to achieve exactly what you said. Our comprehensive high schools range in size to where we have some of the largest in the state to some which are more modest in size in the 1,200, 1,300 students. Based on the size of that student body, that school will get a certain number of teacher allocations. And so they'll have a level of fixed a number of classes they can offer. The more things that we mandate that a high school has to offer, we're putting stress on those ADMs. The larger high schools have more positions to be able to try to manage all that with. Smaller ones they're trying to maneuver between the pathways, the arts and languages, as well as the other core courses they're trying to do. I think what I hope through us fulfilling the obligation of this policy, which is thoughtfully designed, is to be able to say, here's where we have systemic weaknesses and challenges that aren't always the failure of a discretionary decision, but a person, a principal and her team trying to say, how do I manage these competing interests for the diversity of things I'd like to offer? So I think you're pushing on something that is absolutely going to surface, and it's going to have certain equity implications. And I think we're going to have to, it's not always just an individual, which I know you didn't characterize it that way.
No.
I didn't want the listening audience to think, oh, well, a principal willy-nilly decided to do something. Sometimes a principal and her team are making some very difficult decisions with the limited number of positions they have.
But from an equity perspective, the remedy is then in pupil assignment to balance the high school sizes, so we don't have these vast disparities in sizes of schools.
That could be a solution that I think this body can grapple with.
Oh, you're so diplomatic.
So Mr. Shul and then Ms. Ship.
So I think Ms. Sawyer hit on most of my initial questions, and just to reiterate, I think it's fundamental that the arts be supported at every school, regardless of where it is. But then I also wanted to ask about the distribution of resources at those various schools, specifically when we're talking about things like school-owned instruments, pianos, or things of that sort. So to my understanding, we've got a lot of booster associations in theater and the arts that provide a lot of additional support to schools. So how are we working to offset the advantages and disadvantages that we have within supplies and resources?
Right now, we're engaged in an inventory of everything we have out there. We've kind of lost track of exactly what each school has as far as support, right? So starting last winter, we began sort of conceptualizing this concept of creating a baseline inventory of what every school has. What we don't want to do is take away the schools that have booster support. What we want to do is make sure everybody is up to the same standard, as it were. So the issue, I believe, stems from a couple of different things. Very good intentions. We might start a pilot program somewhere. Media arts is one of those examples. So we started 4 years ago, we started a media arts program that one school can sort of get the resources and create a Mac lab. Another school just doesn't have the resources to do that. So we're trying to get that baseline out there. Another case may be something where a principal has interest in dance, so they use one of their ADMs to add a dance, then all the things that come along with that, a dance floor, mirrors, things like that, so that changes. So my thought is most of that has been through good intentions, trying to support the arts. I agree with you. If I had my way, the arts would be core to everything we do. That's obviously my bias and my position. But we're right now engaged in this, down to looking at square footage, looking at what each school has, looking at the courses. Back to your question, exactly what we have. We are in the process of putting these together. We will have I will be putting a report together over the next month or so and pushing it up the chain.
So do you have an average for what kind of support CMS is giving in terms of resources, specifically to the fine arts?
I think it'd be tough to say an average. Yeah. I mean, I think part of the problem has been that I may not necessarily know what boosters have done at a school. You know, on my end, we find out we're still responsible for fixing those instruments, right? But I think we can establish a baseline. We can look at what we have, look where the disparities are. We can thoughtfully build a process so to eliminate these kinds of things. One issue, again, is the standard. Every year a new school is built, we will establish a new standard, right? We may not have a school for 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years, so that standard has lapsed, right? So there needs to be a thoughtful way to do that. Now, that can't become AK gets 3 French horns. That doesn't automatically mean that Harding needs 3 French horns. It has to be based on that school's need and that school's what their programs dictate.
Right. Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's exactly what I mean. So what I'd love to see in a future report is just that inventory and assessment of booster associations, and then most importantly, how we're weighing resources accordingly.
Well, I mean, our intention right now has not been any assessment of booster programs at all. That's not what we're trying to do. All we're trying to do is establish a baseline of where we are with everything, if that makes sense.
Well, I do think that booster programs play into a large part of an equitable distribution of fine arts resources. Thank you.
Yep.
Ms. Sawyer.
Did you say that, like, if booster clubs donate equipment, that CMS then maintains that equipment?
We have been, yes.
Which, to me, if sort of actually magnifies inequities, because schools that can afford to put more in get more money from CMS, and schools that don't have a booster club to buy that equipment, CMS doesn't pay any more, we're not paying that maintenance on that. It
Well-
seems like we're just making the inequities bigger.
I think, well, I'll tell you how I view the situation. If I choose not to fix that instrument, then that's a kid who doesn't have an instrument, regardless of how it came into the school. So when we make that, that is one of the very things that's driving this inventory to say we need to have a baseline of where we are with things to create the equity across the board. Well, it's not equity across the board, it's what a school needs.
Yeah, it's just an interesting way of looking at how money flows where money was.
Okay, Ms. Shipp and then Ms. Cheek.
And I think I'm kind of with, similar to what Ms. Sawyer is saying, but that even starts at the elementary level, when we took away band and orchestra, even at the elementary level, when you talk about visual and performing arts, and looking at our children's talents. And we also had lack of resources, even in the elementary school, as you know, with art materials, with, music materials. And I don't know if that's even been looked at, because it was always an issue how to get, if you had a PTA, to help fund even the music program, when things we were doing to send our students to chorus productions and things like that. So I know that's an issue even at the elementary level, going all the way up to high school. So what have y'all looked at in terms of
I think it
supporting?
starts with, I'm sorry, you got me excited to answer here. I
Go
apologize.
ahead, Dan.
I think it starts with viewing the arts differently, right? It's not a nice to have, it's not an adjunct, it's core to who we are as people. And this is not and I'm saying this to indict CMS, this board or anybody, I think this is a national issue. One of our key initiatives is to work to integrate the arts, which means co-equal integration of a arts standard with some other content standard to catalyze learning. When we can get to a point where we're truly integrating across content, I think some of that, I'm going to say willingness, but some of that ability to let these things happen go away, if that makes sense. I don't know if that answers your question, but I think you look at it from that broader sense where we reimagine what the arts can be and what they can do for our kids.
Right. And I think Ms. Sawyer hit on this one too, probably, like we have parts of the county, my side of the county on the southwest side, we have no visual performing arts programs whatsoever in any of the high schools in that side of the city. So I think that's very important that we look at that. When we look at Northwest School of the Art being the only art magnet, being able to, produce those kinds of students that are interested in going on into that, those fields even after high school, we need to provide that for students across the district. So I think that is very important that we continue to look at how we set up the high schools. We are getting ready to open a new high school out in the Southwest, the new Relief High School, and parents are already talking about, right, what programs are we going to be able to provide that really will support all the different, talents and abilities and careers students might be interested in. And I think this is a big one, visual and performing arts.
Well, I don't know if I can express it to you how passionate I am about the arts. It's who I am, it's what I do. It's not hyperbole to say that I might not have graduated from high school if it wouldn't have been for the arts. My passion doesn't matter, but what matters is a well-thought-out inventory, creating a baseline so you can objectively look at the situation instead of allowing myself or allowing any of us to make decisions based on, again, passion or what we think we believe. There needs to be an objective baseline and build out from there without doing damage to great programs that we already have, build programs up. And that doesn't mean they all look the same. They shouldn't all look the same. It should be really the heart and soul of the school and the kids in the school. It's kind of a different way to look at the phrase meet them where they are, right? I mean, every school has their own soul. Every school has their own culture. The arts often create that culture.
Ms. Cheek?
Thank you, and I appreciate your passion. I was a former South Mex Sabre band. I was first chair flute, piccolo, marching band, concert band, orchestra, and the drama club, high school musicals, et cetera. So, and my kids all went to middle school band, but that's as far as they went. But they all, I thought it was very important for them to at least experience 3 years of band as a whole, well-rounded person.
They probably, if I may, they probably learned lessons in band in middle school that carries them today.
Absolutely. Ruth Peterson, I'm going to give a shout out. She was the band director at Bradley and then at Bailey, and she's a national board certified teacher and an amazing band director at Bailey Middle School now. And she was unfortunate enough to have all 3 of my children over a 10-year period. I don't think there's really anybody in this room or maybe even on TV that doesn't understand that arts sometimes transport you into being able to learn things academically. How many of us know what conjunction junction is? What's your function? I'm not going to sing it for you, but when we transport things into, I mean, I could sing it, and I could sing Happy Birthday to you too, but I'm not going to do that. But conjunction junction, what's your function? I mean, we all know. There's things that we've learned because they've been connected to the arts, because the visual parts of it brings the print media alive, it brings math problems. You know, we all know the correlation between math and music. Words and songs make us remember dates and things. So it's all there to integrate. So I just encourage you to continue that, but I do like when you've taken your passion and said, but we've got to get some data. And we've got to be ready to be able to analyze what's out there. It would be real tough in Mecklenburg County to say that we open every high school, and I think they all get a shipment, like the basic stuff. And then we've got a high school where our board member, Gabe, goes, that's got 3,200 kids. And we've got another one on the other side of town with 1,200. It's safe to say that if we didn't add more band equipment to one high school, that kids wouldn't be able to participate at the same percentage and level. So clearly there are going to be things, if the booster club is the one that's provided it and saved the district from having to do that, I'm okay with that. I'm okay with us fixing the equipment as long as there's equitable amount of equipment across the board. I don't think we all need the same number of French horns or the same number of violas or whatever. I do, though, echo what Ms. Sawyer said. I really would like to make sure that we establish a baseline of visual and performing arts entry-level, at least courses across each high school, so that there is at least some continuity. Mainly, 2 things. We know we have a very transient and mobile society in our county. Kids move from school to school. I don't want them to be in a chorus program in one high school and move, 3 miles away and have to transfer and then not have a chorus program available. But I really would like for us, like we have established a minimum of 10 AP classes, to have some core minimum of visual and performing arts classes per high school. I don't think I'm alone on this board. I'm sure if I said show of hands, I think there might be 9 or 8 that are here. So I really would like for that to be something we look at. And I know about the stressors on our principals to provide things, but your academics go up when you've got the arts to support things. It's part of STEAM, the whole curriculum.
We have a baseline of visual and performing arts in every high school. With your drama question, I'm just in the back of my head, I'm thinking, does that school, I don't want to tell you something I'm not sure about, because there are a few. And I agree with you. I think, we have a crisis of engagement across the country in schools. And I don't want to say the only place, because I don't want to anger my other content friends in the back there, but one of the only places where kids are operating at a high level, both in psychomotor, cognitive, and affective domains at the same time, is in the arts. And I believe that's what you're talking about, with that full engagement and fully human to increase readiness to catalyze learning. So I agree with you.
So yeah, I just want to make sure that we're making sure that every school may not have enough interest to field a high school musical. But if there are kids at one school that want to do a musical, can they not participate in another school? I mean, we need to have our principals and our instructors be open-minded enough to pair them at another school where there might be something being offered.
And there's also great options. You can do small, sort of like black box.
Absolutely.
Smaller pieces, so.
But I thank you for your passion.
Thank you so much.
I'll sing happy birthday later.
All right, any
Everybody's
more
thinking about
questions?
conjunction junction now, I promise, in their head.
Well, I have been, we have one section to go, and I know I've been missing Dr. Jones's voice section, with each section of this report, but the next one, media centers, I don't know what we're going to do. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't know how we're going to represent Dr. Jones. But,
Did I actually? We've all heard her words.
Yeah.
We know what she's going to say.
all right, any questions about this section?
This is the hub.
Yes, no? Yes, Ms. Ship?
I'll just say that media centers are the hub. I don't know if you ever heard that, but when I was working in schools, our media center was the hub. It should be the hub of the school where everything good is going on. And kids should always feel good to come into that media center and know that good things are going on and that books is just, everything is there. And that sense of feeling like everything I know and need to be able to do and learn, I'm going to start right here in this media center. So we would make the media center the hub of the school. And it should be an exciting place. And it was just hard for me to believe that as time went on, we started having situations where we even closed down media centers. We didn't have media centers open in a school and running. And then the diversity of books and materials, and we did closed circuit news media programs from the media center. And we had, computer centers going on in the media center. It is the hub, and it should be a very warm, inviting place for children. So I'm really concerned, and I want to hear more about, and we've heard that this media center situation, it's important that we bring that back in the life of every school, because that is where reading starts. And when you talk about reading to learn and learning to read, media center.
Hear, hear.
Ms. Byers-Bailey?
Thank you. I've been trying to get Dr. Jones over to one of my schools that has transformed their media center into a CTE type of robotic.
Makerspace.
Makerspace, okay. And so all the books have been put on these bookcases that roll into the wall. So if you want a book, you have to pull the roller thing out to get to the books. But when you walk into the makerspace/media center, you don't see any books. You see all the makerspace stuff. I think she would melt in the floor if she walked in there and saw the makerspace and said, "This is our media center," and she's going to say, "Where are the books?" "In the wall." So, what's your response to that?
I believe the school that you're speaking to did that with a special grant.
Yes.
So that doesn't represent the movement or the vision for our media centers. We do embrace the makerspace movement. We do think that is a valuable outlet for creativity and innovation, and we want that to happen in partnership with reading advocacy and literacy. So shutting the books away is definitely not part of our media vision in CMS.
So are we going to fix it?
I would love to have a conversation with you about that.
Have a conversation with Dr. Jones and watch her walk up the wall and across the roof.
Any other questions? Ms. De La Hara?
Just a quick question here. I'm reading the 3 steps for recruiting and building a support system, creating a media coordinator career path. I'm just assuming this is a national problem. There's nothing specific to CMS or North Carolina for the deficit in available media coordinators. Just kind of confirming that. And then secondly, I do want to confirm, like our local schools do have a specialization for that, UNCC, et cetera, our local schools all have that, right? So it just looks like there needs to be a real effort. What a shame that this spring fair got delayed, I guess because of the virus, but that's just a really big concern that there's such a deficit.
UNCC does not have a program, but UNCG does, and several other state schools in North Carolina. And we actually have probably about 20 students right now in master's programs throughout the state working to get their master's degree. So we have a strong cohort of people moving in that direction right now.
Anybody else? Ms. Cheek?
I am just going to channel Dr. Jones a moment because I have to. I mean, if she was here, we would not be done talking about media centers yet. I have to say that. I want to just give a shout out to the media center specialists that we have. I know some of them that come in dressed like Junie B. Jones. And I've done reading things and the Dr. Seuss reading visits at schools all over in the elementary schools in the north part of the county. And we need more, and we need them to be very well-versed between the print media and the electronic, especially now. But I just want to give a shout out to the importance of the child to be able to hold a book in their hands and learn how to turn the pages the correct way, and just some of the really basic stuff. I have a new grandson, he's 8 months old, and my daughter, from the minute he went home from the hospital sent him home a book. It was a black and white book, one of the really visual interest books for newborns. And I wish our hospitals here would do that, shouting out to the two main hospital systems here. He now, at 8 months old, will sit with a board book in his hands and he will flip the pages himself. And I realize that not every baby has that advantage, that the families aren't all doing that. So I really do think that we need to figure out a way to get our hospitals to send every baby home with the book. We worry about them being in the safe car seat, but sending them home with the book, it would be just, would be so awesome.
Agreed, and thank you on behalf of our media coordinators. We have a talented, dynamic, and passionate group, so thank you for your compliment.
There's so many amazing ones. I follow a lot of them on social media, and I love when they get dressed up for costume and books, and just that they make the books come alive for their students in every way possible.
Agreed.
All right, any more questions on media centers or this equity report in general? Anybody want to sing happy birthday? Thank you, Dr. Barnes, for spending your birthday with us. Thank you. Thank you for this very important report. I look forward to the next one. Thank you. All right. I now turn to the superintendent for our last report, which will be a progress report on our remote learning and our transition to in-person learning.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the board. Tonight, I am pleased to provide a brief update regarding our continued execution of plans to prepare our schools to reopen for in-person instruction. First, a brief update on the Mecklenburg County COVID conditions. Currently, the county has a 5.2% positivity rate. The case rate is about the same as in our previous report, and that is 49.7 cases per 100,000 residents. Also, 76 of the 77 CMS facilities that offer extensions or EC pre-K services have been visited. So that's more than 98% of those facilities. Overall, more than 72% of our 176 schools have been visited for readiness assessments. As it relates to exceptional children in particular, less than 1 week from tonight, we will welcome back approximately 1,050 of our exceptional children students. These are identified students whose needs cannot be reasonably met with remote learning. Our EC leadership staff continues to work alongside departments and district leaders to prepare for the launch of in-person services for this school year. Our EC teachers have been engaged in phone conversations with both parents of students in self-contained classes and public separate schools. As a result of parent decision-making, about just over 1,000 students will participate in EC in-person services, and 933 will remain in a full remote learning environment. 21 families have not yet finalized the decision, and 46 have not yet been reached after we've made multiple calls to the home. So we continue to work on that. We have been working alongside our learning community superintendents and principals to create staffing plans for each school hosting EC in-person services. Many schools have teachers or EC staff members on leave or receiving remote work accommodations. Nearly all of our schools serving this first group of EC students have been visited, and nearly every EC classroom is ready for students. The final school visit will happen tomorrow, and all facilities will be ready. Also, all of the PPE, personal protective equipment, either already at the schoolhouse or en route via courier with delivery expected by Friday. Bus labels have been distributed, and transportation is in final stages for student transportation. Child nutrition is preparing for meal service to the students returning for in-person services. And I know I share our EC staff's enthusiasm in saying that I cannot wait to see this first group of students back on our campus very soon. I'll next discuss staffing and employees. So last week, following the special board meeting, we shared reporting expectations and supports with all staff. We then asked principals to survey their staff and to provide responses to human resources no later than this Friday, September 25th. The survey questions ask about employee status on returning, including whether they intend to take leave. We are also using the survey to determine how many staff will take advantage of the option to bring their children to school for childcare on their remote learning days. In terms of our current vacancies, we have the following openings. Bus drivers, 20 bus driver openings, and that's based upon our current student enrollment. Custodians, between our custodians and head custodians, we have 32 vacancies. Nurses, 38 vacancies, and 36 teacher vacancies. Regarding athletics, Monday, September 14th, launched the start of our staggered return to high school athletic teams, and we launched that with cross country and volleyball. That was for skill development workouts on our campuses. I will note that no off-campus workouts are permitted at this time except for the October 12th through 31st gymnasium exception at our high school voting sites. The following are recommendations from high school athletic directors on staggered return dates for remaining teams to our campuses. Swimming, September 28th, swimming and diving. September 30th, basketball and cheerleading. October 5th, men's soccer and men's and women's lacrosse. October 12th, football and marching band is under consideration for October 12th. October 19th, men's and women's golf, men's tennis, women's soccer, and women's softball. And then October 26th, baseball, women's tennis, men's and women's track and field, and wrestling. Now I'd like to talk briefly about our pre-kindergarten return to in-person instruction. Our pre-K teachers will return to buildings next week and have 2 weeks to prepare to welcome students into classrooms on October 12th. A total of 53 CMS schools will have pre-K instruction as we return to in-person learning. Our current pre-K enrollment is 2,501 students in Bright Beginnings and 603 students in NC pre-K. That represents 77% of available seats in Bright Beginnings and 41% of available NC pre-K seats. In comparison, at this time last school year, we had 2,605 enrolled in Bright Beginnings, 80% of available seats, and 1,318 enrolled in NC pre-K, which represented 89% of seats. There are just over 1,005 pre-K applications in process currently. For 699 of those applications, we are communicating with families to get the required documentation completed. And for the remaining 406 current applications, we have received all documentation and are currently placing families who accept placement into available Bright Beginnings and NC pre-K seats. Children who have been placed into a classroom will have a call from their teacher by the end of next week asking whether they will attend in person or using a remote option. Next, I want to talk about hotspots and connectivity. Getting all of our students connected to remote learning remains a priority. CMS schools have requested 6,632 hotspots for students without connectivity. Schools have picked up most of these devices, and the remaining are available for pickup or will be very shortly. This is an ongoing process, and the number of students in need is likely to increase due to continued pandemic conditions. We have asked principals to find out which students lack access, and one change is that now that we have access to additional devices, we are asking a different question. Is the access that students have conducive to successful distance learning? Previously, we asked if students had reliable internet access, but what we have found is that some who thought internet was reliable have discovered that additional internet speed or increased data thresholds are necessary for remote learning. As it relates to school reopening and our design team in particular, we have stated that we have launched a cross-functional design team which includes district leaders and principals, and that team continues to meet weekly. The focus of that team has shifted from designing the transition to ensuring tight execution so we are ready to welcome students back in their assigned rotations. The team's current priorities are school and operational readiness for those schools preparing to welcome back pre-K and identified exceptional students. There is close collaboration with the district response team, which is the group charged with monitoring the metrics dashboard. As it relates to enrollment, CMS's unofficial 20th day enrollment, and I stress unofficial 20th day enrollment, is 142,177. There remains some cleanup of the work in terms of coding within PowerSchool before the official numbers can be shared publicly. And this is a typical part of our annual process. Just so you know, our projected enrollment for 2020-2021 was 147,203 students. In 2019, 2020, our 20th day enrollment was 146,888. So our unofficial enrollment this year is just over 3% lower than this time last year. And Madam Chair, board members, that concludes my update, and I would be happy to take any questions that board members may have.
Okay, thank you. And I'm going to, I know that the night is running long, so I'm going to do questions in order. We'll do one question each, and if you could just keep your questions to, you know, the specific topic that we're covering right now. And I'll start with you, Mr. Schul.
I don't have any questions.
Okay. Mr. Strain?
I don't have any questions.
Okay. Ms. Ship?
We've talked about the teachers coming back and the schedule for coming back. Have we also talked about the schedule for the teachers, for the kids that are coming back in K-5? Are those teachers also realizing that when they need to get back in and how they're going to get back in? Because I know you mentioned the EC teachers and the pre-K, but as we begin to look at the K-5, what notification and what are we doing to get them ready?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for that question, Ms. Ship. We have communicated with all staff in terms of expectations and return dates for those students in the different grade bands. We anticipate that we'll have to continue to communicate often about expectations around return dates. But we have done an initial communication with all staff in terms of return date expectations.
And we'll continue to monitor everything in terms of these teams and where we are in terms of design.
Yes, ma'am.
And our audits for our school buildings.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, we continue to monitor that. In terms of, one of the things I did want to lift up, so in our last report last week, when we talked about there was a snapshot on the screen of about 3 slides, and it was really a snapshot of the 65 questions that every school is being asked. And we're going to, we have a copy of that, and we're going to post it on the website so that families, staff members, members of our community can get a sense of the thoroughness of that, that questionnaire, essentially. And so I just wanted to lift that up in case someone wants to know more about what type of questions are being asked. So that will be put on our website this week.
Okay.
Ms. Byers-Bailey?
Thank you. So we are not full in terms of our pre-Ks, but we have students that are in the process of signing up or in the process of filling out the applications.
Yes, ma'am. We still do have students who are in the process.
So do you think we're going to fill up all of our seats by the time we open?
We hope so. We have that availability. So we hope that we will fill those seats.
Okay, so we have plenty of students in the pipeline then?
Yes, ma'am.
And they are willing to come?
Yes, that's what families have expressed to us, and I haven't received any information to tell me anything to the contrary, that they aren't willing to come.
All right, well, thank you very much.
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Sawyer?
Thank you. Since we're on the path to fulfilling our at least immediate hotspot needs for students, are we still hosting the community hotspot sites, or are those being discontinued?
We have continued to host those sites. We have 5 school sites and 2 community sites, 1 community site on the east side of town and the second community site on the west side of town. And then we have schools that fall within the Crescent area of our community, but we do continue to provide that opportunity for families.
So, but are we missing kids who need hotspots that don't? I'm wondering why we will need the community sites if we get the hotspots out to folks.
Well, we may not need those anymore. And then we'll have to make that decision point. Those hotspots began arriving last week, and they have been distributed, most of them, out. And so,
So we're still getting them pushed out.
exactly, until we fully do that, then I think we can say that we probably have to look at making a different decision around the community sites where we have the buses and the extended Wi-Fi.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
No questions for me. Thank you.
Ms. Cheek?
Yes, thank you. So, Mr. Winston, I live in the northern part of the county. We are surrounded by other counties up there. I mean, we're surrounded, the whole county, but my particular area has 3 counties that butt up to it. All 3 of those counties are back in school or are planning to come back. They're all A-Day, B-Day, and all of them have announced that they're coming back full-time for at least K-3 in the next few weeks. Are we looking at what's happening in the surrounding districts and how what they're seeing compares with what our metrics are? Are they seeing things that might help us prepare to open? Can we glean insight or advice? And are we considering, or can we start considering, how we could escalate our timeline of bringing students back, or look at other alternatives for bringing our students back using just an A-Day, B-Day, or an A-B rotation versus an ABC, or even in light of the governor's latest recommendation last week that K-5 could come back full-time? Are we looking at options that we could move our program into a faster timeline or bring students back to the classroom more often?
So yes, Ms. Cheek. So I think there were a couple of questions. To the first 2 questions, yes and yes. Are we collaborating with our peer districts in the community, in the region, as well as across the state?
Across the state, too, but yes.
Nationally. We continue to do all of those things because we do want to glean from any insights that they may have that may benefit us, both negatively and positively. So if things haven't gone as they have expected, we want to learn from that, but we certainly want to learn from things that have gone well. So yes. In terms of the governor's announcement, we've continued to move forward with our process that the board approved last week. But we also understand that the governor's announcement provided some additional flexibility to school districts. And the governor indicated that when districts are ready to move to Plan A, then that's an option available for them. We know we do have some additional flexibilities, and there are some scenarios that we are looking at So one of the things I think it's important to note is that while we have a plan in place, if things are going better than expected and the metrics continue to go in the right direction and we haven't experienced anything detrimental, then we could come back to the board and say, well, we could speed up moving more kids. That's an option that we do have. And so we would want to, make sure that we're doing our due diligence before such a recommendation could be made.
I appreciate that, and I appreciate your open-mindedness. I know Dr. Hayes is also here. I appreciate all the incredible work going into this. If nothing else that this pandemic has taught us is that flexibility is the key, because there has been nothing but changing times since March when it hit the United States. So I appreciate your flexibility. I think that the listening audience will appreciate the fact that we are not going to be held to those dates if things improve or don't improve. So the flexibility, I think, is something that our listening public, our parents, our constituents really need to hear. I appreciate you sharing that.
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Marshall?
One of the things that I continue to hear from staff is certainly, and parents too, is the support of the medical professionals in our schools right now. So those nurse vacancies, which I know have improved a bit, and I know that the county is working with us. I'm most interested to see what kind of additional supports we could have. I know that we have some CARES money that we are looking at to help us with that. So could you speak a little bit to what is in the pipeline to make sure we have supports? Because we're going to have some schools eventually that come back that will be larger than others. And so, the fact is, we may need not just one nurse there, but a nurse plus, so of some sort. And so I'm just curious in terms of where are we in sort of really honing down on that medical support for those schools?
Yes, thank you, Ms. Marshall. You may recall last week when Kathy Elling gave part of the report, and I'm not sure if she mentioned this specifically, but I do want to share that we're looking at providing some supplemental support, to help with the nursing situation that we have in our schools. So that will help offset some of those responsibilities that our nurses would have. So that's one thing that we are doing, and I'm confident that will pay dividends.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yes.
So I just have one question, and that is if you have the number with you, but, because I didn't ask you this in advance.
That's
but,
okay.
Last spring when schools shut down so quickly, and there were initially about 3,000 students that, teachers could not track down. They just sort of disappeared, and eventually we whittled that number down to a few dozen students. Do we have a number like that for this year, now that we're in remote learning?
We do. We're a couple of weeks or just over a month into remote learning, and the latest number that I received today was fewer than 50 students. And we can, and that's in part due to the tremendous work that our principals are doing and our teachers and support staff and reaching out to families. Just to make sure that, we're staying engaged with our families. So that's where that number is today, but it's due to the hard work of our principals and our teachers and other support staff at our schools, counselors and social workers and many others who are doing that work.
I know we have teachers and school psychologists and counselors who are not only checking in, through the computer Zoom, but making phone calls and even knocking on doors. And so I just want to, I guess end the evening with a thank you to our school staff who are working so hard to support our students in these truly less than ideal circumstances, and that's an understatement. There's some heroic work going on out there, and I just want to thank thousands of heroes who are making that happen.
I second that.
All right, well, with that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
All right, motion from Ms. Byers-Bailey, second from Ms. Shipp. All in favor, please let it be known by a show of hands. And any opposed? We're adjourned. Thank you.
entertainment segment. The Carolina Panthers welcome you to the Little Panthers Game of the Month. From District 3 Stadium here in Rock Hill, South Carolina, the Carolina Panthers present the Little Panthers Game of the Month. And tonight, we have a YMCA Rock Hill Gray Y Division matchup, 11 and 12-year-olds, between the Sylvia Circle Demons